Allora, di nuovo un saluto a tutti.
So once again, a greeting to everyone. Thank you for coming. Today we address a topic that has been discussed for decades, where there is a controversy, for those who follow these topics, between those who say we went there and those who say we didn't go there. I haven't gone there. Unfortunately, both in the pro faction and in the against faction, they're both wrong or they're both right, because the real protagonist of this whole story, which is extraterrestrials, is missing. So today I want to provide data and things that will help people form a more complete idea, because there are aspects linked to this extraordinary and incredible event that was what they call the conquest of the moon, then in reality we haven't conquered anything, because the moon is 6 times smaller than Earth. And it's not that if we send 5 or 6 people to the Sahara Desert, we can say that we have conquered planet Earth if we were aliens. We went to a gigantic body compared to the small human. We call it the conquest of the moon, but we went to the moon. A truly exceptional, extraordinary undertaking, in my opinion, not appreciated in its real dimension. And studying this topic, which is now old, the last lunar landing took place in the very distant 1972, so more than 50 years ago. Yet studying what happened in those times, it seems like living in the future. Because an undertaking of that level has never happened again on Earth. It was an extraordinary thing. These men who faced this incredible challenge had truly impressive courage. But in reality, there was a hidden hand that favored everything that happened, both before departure and during and after, so I will address this topic. I want to specify that this is an extract of 3 entire days of seminar. So in a couple of hours compared to 3 days, you can imagine the amount of information there is in these works that I have already presented, and I presented them all in Florence. I have scheduled others because there are even more hidden aspects and even more incredible that almost no one knows, and that are even at the very foundation of this incredible conquest. I will start from an axiom, or rather, not from an axiom, from a phrase that Our Lady dictated to the 3 shepherds on October 13, 1917, which was the day when she dictated the 3rd secret of Fatima. The concept is, Satan reigns over the highest places, determining the course of things. So even the conquest of the moon was programmed by Satan. With all the implications, then, that this has in aspects, let's say, considered secular or scientific, because this force that dominates the world, in fact, expresses itself also in matter, obviously. That is, it creates material structures that are the war industry, the pharmaceutical industry, etc., etc., etc. Since we are a spirit inside flesh, even spiritual entities manifest themselves in matter. They are not in the spiritual world because if they have to implement a process within human society, they must do it with material structures. So Satan creates banks, money, that type of science with the final H that we have seen operating during the past 2 years, where all that absurd situation happened. But before entering the topic, I want to call here Giovanni Bongiovanni, who is the head of an operational group that exists in Rome. So if there are Romans or Lazio residents, a microphone, guys, please. Hi, Giovanni. Bring a microphone for Giovanni, because making him speak from this one is a bit complicated. Then they'll mistake us for fluids. Not only is Giovanni the head of the operational and study and research group that exists here in Rome, with which I obviously directly collaborate, but Giovanni is also the president of a non-profit association that works to bring some relief and benefit to the weakest segment of human society, which is children. And so he has various activities. Giovanni, please, I leave you the floor.
Grazie Pier. Sì, buonasera a tutti, grazie per essere qui, quindi grazie ancora Pier per...
Thank you, Pierre. Yes, good evening to everyone. Thank you for being here. So thanks again to Pierre for this space that is always useful for the association, to spread the projects and initiatives we deal with. The part, let's say, of the spiritual group has been already announced by Pierre. So, rightly, if you leave us your contacts, we will meet again already next month to talk precisely about these topics, about matters that concern the spirit. So you are all invited, whoever wants to participate. We meet together, we discuss, we have a chat, sometimes we present topics, and together we deal with them. We get to know each other better, and then we dedicate ourselves to initiatives of dissemination as well. As far as I'm concerned, my main activity, my work, what I feel is my mission is to coordinate an organization, non-profit, that carries out solidarity projects in the world. This association arises from the will of my family, from my father, from Giorgio, from me, who immediately after a trip returning from Argentina, as I returned last month together with some guys from Rome, who came with me. It was precisely that, of wanting to work in an organized way, thus creating a subject that would allow us to realize concrete projects. These are humanitarian, educational projects concerning people's health. And where do we work mainly? In Latin America and in Italy. The association is based in Palermo. We in Palermo in Italy have projects of education in one of the neighborhoods most difficult in the city, which is Albergaria or Ballarò. There too if you want. We receive people and we can take you to know and show you all the realities we deal with and support. Why do I care to reiterate this again? Because for us it is important to show what we do. If you now enter our social channels, Funima International or Giovanni Bongiovanni, Instagram or Facebook, you will find precisely the documents, the stories, the posts, the reels, the videos that we make when we return from the places where we carry out the projects, and very often we bring people with us. I, who am the person who travels the most, I often go to Latin America once a year. At least, I invite people to travel with me on a trip that we call Trip to Argentina. This trip usually lasts 10 days, because often volunteers can take a limited time from work and visit all the locations of the Chaco forest, because we in Argentina work in an area called the Chaco forest. In the north, we are on the border with Bolivia and Paraguay. There we have been working for 20 years. I was 17 years old and made my first trip with some friends, and we have never abandoned that area. We are also in the Andes, from 3,000 to 4,000 meters, where we have built multifunctional centers to offer services. These are primary services that we offer to people. The fact is that from this trip we returned from the Chaco forest. It is one of the most important areas for us, where we work with more intensity, where we dedicate more energy. Why? Because there live the indigenous communities. That is, the association, right from the start, decided to work for a closeness that we feel with indigenous populations all over the world. We feel very close from a spiritual point of view because we share some beliefs, let's say especially the vision that we have, in a generic sense, I say it, towards the sky. Okay? Both us, me personally, the people who follow us, all those who are a bit around this world of spirituality, of the message that we spread, we are very close to everything that comes from the sky. So are they. Moreover, they are the subjects who, in our society, in our world are the most abandoned, those who have experienced the most situations of suffering regarding the world of colonization, to what Westerners have brought to the world. So, Latin America for us is a very important country from this point of view, both spiritually, but also because we have identified in indigenous populations, those populations that have experienced exploitation the most. And the well-being that we then have today in the West comes from the wealth we have taken away from these populations. So the fact is that what do we do there concretely? We implement starting from water, because the areas in which we work are areas of extreme drought. We carry out projects that improve access to drinking water. So we build wells, small aqueducts, waterworks, rainwater collection structures. We deliver tanks, and we do it through people who work for us locally every day. We have a staff of about 10 people who visit an area that is very vast. So there are dozens of communities that we accompany, that we support, those in which we have carried out projects, consider over the course of 20 years, and then we accompany them for all their lives. If we build a well in an indigenous community, I give an example of Wichi origin that could be Mora Uno, Pameshi Wet or others. We accompany them for all their lives. After we have carried out the project, we accomplish it thanks to funds that come from you, the 50, the 100 euros, the 1,000 euros that ordinary people put in. Even those who have small businesses, we also receive support from small businesses and from small philanthropic foundations. When we complete the work, we obviously bring the documentation to Italy, we show it, volunteers go to see and work in these areas. And then our local operators begin a path of accompaniment to create growth and development within the community. You know that water is the basis. From water, then we start with production activities for the self-sustenance of the community, agriculture and livestock production. And then, being points of reference for these people, we are interlocutors between their civilization, let's say, and ours. So, with government subjects, we interface also to help them in asking for more services, in protesting when there are things that don't work, but always in a coherent and organized way. So, we want to do it in a clean way, trying to understand what are the needs of a population, of a civilization that would still like to live as they did once, but that can no longer live as before because they have been totally colonized by our world, so they live in a sort of limbo. Here this limbo puts them in extreme difficulty at the moment when they have to dialogue with institutions, because basically they don't understand each other. For example, private property for indigenous communities is something inconceivable. Here, there is private property clearly. Around them, there are large landowners who work in intensive monoculture, sugarcane, and so on, and they cannot access there. For them, it is a very strange thing from this point of view, because for them, the land is everyone's land. The mountain is everyone's mountain. The exploitation the companies that work in the extraction of minerals make for them is an abuse that is done to Mother Earth. Also, from this point of view, we feel them very close from a spiritual point of view. Well, we try to help them in this understanding. And then, with the great network that we have of associations and organizations, both private and institutional, if there are situations in which we do not work directly, but we put them in contact with our great network that we have on the territory to try to satisfy all their needs. So we are a bit like interlocutors. And then practically with the fundraising that we do in Italy, we carry out works and then we accompany them in this path of growth. What I said, you can find it all inside our channels. So if you want, share our stories, our posts, put a like, make a comment. That is, spread as much as possible this reality because we need help. What do we ask of you? Participation in this sense, dissemination, and also donations. Because the association lives on small donations, thanks to these small donations we can carry out these projects and offer a better life to these people. Our channels are www.funimainternational.org, Facebook and Instagram. Funime International, or Giovanni Bongiovanni. I, in my personal channels, always talk about my work and the association. Obviously publishes its projects and asks for funds. So, if you want to donate, also because there are people online who now could easily connect, we also have a page that is dedicated to donations. You find this title a bit everywhere, Water Emergency. That's why, in those areas, the water emergency is constant, 365 days a year. So we work to fight the problem of water emergency and drought, and the lack of primary infrastructures that are inside the Chaco forest, which is not a small area, but is a gigantic area. Okay, a locality, let's call it, enormous, that includes various provinces of Argentina, as well as of Paraguay, as well as of Bolivia. And they are not lost areas, or rather they are, because it is difficult. To reach these areas, we move with 4x4 vehicles, because there isn't even a road, basically. It's made of earth. Infrastructures don't exist. So clearly they're remote areas, but hundreds of thousands of people live there. So, I heard a friend saying, I was passionate about Native Americans. I bought their CDs. I bought dream catchers. All those things they make. But remember, or rather, let's remember, that they are not populations that have disappeared. They have been exterminated, but today, all over the world, in Latin America where we work, thousands of indigenous communities live. People who would still like to live as before, but can no longer do so because they are not allowed. In Argentina, they are pushed towards the river, they are pushed towards the interior, in the most inhospitable areas of the country. Well, we want to fight this situation. Help us with donations if you can. And we will repay you, let's say, with all the transparency and honesty that we can, okay? So, thank you all. Today we also have a table, if you want to contribute. In Italy, another great project is to help local producers who produce food. You find them on the table, sauce, oil, pasta, and so on. We buy them from producers, mainly Sicilian, but also from the rest of Italy, because I live in Palermo. I am there, they are social cooperatives, we buy from them and resell them also through a shop that is progettomediterraneo.bio. Today, however, you can find the products there. If you want to support the association, either with a donation or by taking something home with you. See you soon.
A presto.
Thank you, Giovanni. It's nice to see young people who are committed to something for others. If only there were more in the world to solve the very serious situations that we are experiencing. Last night, as you all know, Iran responded to Israel. Let's make the sign of the cross. I think for now they will stop. Because a concept that the man of this world lacks is considering that God is a real entity. God is always present in the history of humanity for a very banal reason. He created it. Then what create means is all a discourse. Because everything that we have known as religion or spirituality is a big minestrone, because the underlying problem is always and only one. Man corrupts himself, and I assure you that they all corrupt themselves. So institutions, in fact, are ideas, but do not exist. They are personified by real people who have names and surnames. And as in all environments, there are honest people, very few, and corrupt or corruptible people, the majority. So all institutional human environments are human environments. The Church, the Vatican better to say, is a human environment. The world of politics is a human environment. The world of finance is a human environment. So when we reason by absolutist corpus, the Church, finance, we are wrong. It's just a matter between us human beings, children of mother and father. At least until yesterday it was so. Then today there is a certain restlessness. But we come conditioned to mental schemes that then become behavioral schemes, and rigid thought schemes very difficult to modify. Because these ideas, these concepts, These parameters are inculcated in us since we are in gestation in the womb of our mother. So when the human being is formed and reaches the age of majority, 21 years, not the bureaucratic age of 18, but the age of maturation, the third septenary, 21 years, at that point we, spirit, are inside a prison, which is our soul, our body, that have been formed by false ideas, by a false religion, by a false science, by false concepts. Here is that Satan reigns over the highest places, determining the course of things. What is for every human being his highest place? His body and his soul. So he reigns there too. So we are prisoners of a distorted structure that continually leads us to error. Have you ever heard the term synchronicity? They have sold it to us, wow, synchronicity. But it's a very banal thing. Only that the meaning of synchronicity, as it has been sold to us by New Age, is that once in a while things go well for us. That is, there is a concatenation of positive facts that make us say, wow. But we always live in synchronicity, but of bad luck. It's always synchronicity. Because where there is uniformity of effect, there a natural law is acting. So the humanity of this world is now used for thousands and thousands of years to live in the synchronicity to things going badly for them. But it is always a synchronicity, so there is a law that is operating in the synchronicity, that things go badly for us. Since it is uniform worldwide, because it goes badly also for the powerful. They enjoy a certain time, but then the empires collapse. We have had the Caesars who self-deified themselves, the pharaohs. They too collapsed because synchronicity is dominated by the law of cause-effect that dominates supreme throughout the universe. So where is the problem? We use the law of cause-effect badly. Why do we use it badly? Because we don't know it exists. We know bad luck, fortune. Fortune is blind and bad luck has eagle sight. All these things, but it's not like that. Because if fortune and misfortune existed, there would be at least one state in the world where people live according to justice, peace, and brotherhood. There isn't. Because we all violate the law of cause and effect every day, and this brings us suffering because the law of cause and effect dominates us. It is not I who choose when to incarnate, and I don't even choose when to die. I am dominated by this law that determines my entering into matter and my exiting from matter. These are fundamental concepts for every human being because the law of cause and effect does not reason by group, does not reason by nation, it reasons by individual. So, if I learn to use the law of cause-effect, I am invincible, because being a superior law, no human can violate it. In fact, what does Christ say? You should not fear. Who can take away your body? You should fear who has power over body and spirit, because who has power over the spirit is master of the law of cause-effect. In fact, Christ, what did he do? One was lame because he had a karma. He removed the karma, and that one walked, or the blind. Jesus removes the karma, so law of cause-effect, and that one begins to see again, so Christ had power over the law. For this he came. But the false religion hides these things from us, does not teach them to us. So we desperately need truth, because we live in a world of lies that has formed us, that is, has made us mentally handicapped, unable to manage our life. We always make the same mistake. Politics. But how can a political party, made up of people who have power and money, solve the problem of the citizen? It is obvious that here the citizen will be exploited. Yet we always fall into that error. So the solution to the problem starts from the individual. Your worst enemy is the one in front of the mirror when you go to the bathroom in the morning. It is the only work that we must do, reform ourselves. Because only one person has power over himself. From the outside, each of us for others is an unknown world. Indeed, we are an unknown world to ourselves because if we are already immortal and don't know it, and instead we live like mortals, it is a dramatic situation. because the fact of being afraid of death will lead me to make reckless choices that will ruin my life. If you don't get the shot, you get sick and die. It was a lie. Yet it was said by the highest level of government. He should be reported for causing alarm, but instead everyone, since they are powerful, makes fun of us and goes straight on their way. The extraterrestrial visit, therefore, is here. These beings visit us mainly for one reason. Every revolution stems from a new vision of life. Political, financial, economic, whatever you want, religious one. Now we live in a time where the people reason and have the same desires as the rich. So the revolution is impossible to make because the ideas are the same. And so we are all, people and rich, conformed to this system. The rich have formed it and have conformed us to their system through the media, which are all corrupt. So we need a new vision of life. On the planet there isn't one. Here is that these beings, who have instead formed civilizations that work perfectly, who have eliminated all evils, poverty, disease, wars, social injustice, bring us a new vision of life. So the most precious value of the extraterrestrial visit is not the flying saucers, it is information. To inform, to give form, we are malformed by a lying information. It is not a Masonic symbol, for conspiracy theorists. We need correct information that helps us in a path that can also last years, to reform ourselves. The good news is that this very complicated work is helped by the very high science that these beings use, because they monitor the planet following all those human beings who are eligible for a new society that in God's project will be established also in our earth. Therefore, information is fundamental. In fact, I do information. That is, I try to bring corrections to all the lies that the system proposes to us. So, information, my website, www.piergiorgiocaria.it, where you find information. I offer 20 books in electronic format that I have selected, and that have been the basis that has allowed me to initiate this process of reform of my person, because me too, I was like everyone else. I worked for the railways, I took a salary, I had fun, I did all the things that young people do. Until I met a contactee, Eugenio Siragusa. It's a story that I have told many times, even in the last interview, that Dario Sanfilippo made me, whom I greet in case he is listening to the conference, where for the umpteenth time he asked me how it started, how it happened. So I retold in a perhaps slightly more extensive and more detailed form my vicissitudes that led me to live this incredible experience, especially for me. In fact, if I were not the protagonist of my life and someone told it to me, I would not believe him, because they are things a bit too out of the norm. So information. These 20 books are, I repeat, the formative basis that at the time Eugenio himself advised me, plus others that I have added over time, that will help you to begin to form a new vision of life through knowledge that is not of this world. So they are all texts written by human beings, but dictated by superior entities. They are books that cover a period of about 70 years, so some things might give a little difficulty in reading, because they are a bit dated, but I advise that study groups be created. So also in Rome, the group that Giovanni manages, which then, let's say, me and Giovanni obviously interface with each other to be able to implement a policy of collaboration that is harmonious. Why is it important, the new information? It is not only the acquisition of new data, of new knowledge. It begins a structural reform also at the biological level, because our brain is the stomach that must digest knowledge and make it its own. It is a process that we live when we study at school or languages or whatever. At the beginning, a new concept is very difficult. We all know it when we face a new school subject that we don't know, because the brain at that moment does not have the neural networks that can digest those new concepts. So there is the effort of study where the brain, by its natural automatisms, begins to create synapses. And gradually, in the mnemonic hard disks of the brain, it begins to write the information, and it is written by the neurons. And then they write it in holographic form. I have had the opportunity to discuss these things with scientists who study them with machinery. Very sophisticated. So these books must be read. Below, don't stop on a line that you don't understand. Go ahead. Let the brain work automatically. You finish them all, and then start again. I estimate that more or less it takes 5 to 6 readings of each text. Read, reread, and more you will understand because the brain does its automatic work. This is very important. And it becomes less tiring to read like this in nonchalance. In surplus, I read. I understood half, it doesn't matter. A third, it doesn't matter. I continue and then I start again. Many don't like the electronic format. We also have them printed in paper, by the way. 0 emissions, they don't download. They are free energy, they always work, as long as there is a little light. The cost is lower than what you would spend going to print the electronic formats in a copy shop. Let's say we have done it to try to facilitate people in the acquisition of this knowledge. So clear? That is, reform starts from a simple reading. Then we must unite in groups because alone you are not good even in paradise. Here, therefore, the group of Rome rather than other groups. And inside the group, then these themes become occasions for analysis, for discussion, work is done, funema, or whatever you like. And gradually one grows and small centers of social renewal are created that radiate, not only in themselves, but around new concepts, new visions of life, new ways of behaving that are the foundations of what will be the new society of the future. So it is very important. Don't stay alone. Unite. It is better because the more you will enter into these concepts and this truth, the more society will reject you, because it will see you different, and the different in this planet is not welcomed, is marginalized. For those who perhaps in the future would like to buy other booklets, there is this email, info@cosmicshop.it, where you can order books in paper form and also other gadgets. Then there is my YouTube channel, subscribe. It is full of free information. They are truly the most varied themes, which are another basin of acquisition of new information. Then the video format obviously also allows you to see, not just read. Then there is the website of Giorgio Bongiovanni, contactee and stigmatized, Giovanni's father, where he publishes the messages he receives from these beings, and also being astigmatized from the divine world. There is also his YouTube channel, Giorgio Bongiovanni Video. For those who would like to stay in touch in my site, there is the events section. There is my Facebook page, where the same we publish information and also news. There is my Instagram channel, my Telegram channel where you receive notifications of events and also other information. To subscribe to the newsletter, scrolling down, you find this form to fill out, and you subscribe to the newsletter or by making a request directly to the email secretaria at piergiorgiocaria.it. In addition to conferences, there are online seminars that are super in-depth explorations of the topics I touch on in the conferences. So I said, this work that I will present today is an extract of 3 days of seminar on the topics I will talk about today, but of many others that, for obvious reasons, I could not include because the focus of this meeting is the extraterrestrial presence in the conquest of the moon. So 3 days of seminar, imagine. And it's not all I'll have to do, at least 2 more. You find them in this little rectangle on the upper left of my site's page. Available videos. Click on it. And you will end up on this page where there are some of the seminars I have done over the years. Not all of them, because this is a temporary phase. We are setting up a site, let's call it that, where there will be all the seminars available, where there are important courses like Karma and Reincarnation, which are 14 days of seminar. Karma and Reincarnation, or Sacred Geometry, which are, I believe, 8 days of seminar. Then there are particular topics, for example, the Gate of Hell and the Dark Secrets of the Elite, symbolisms and occult meanings on the diabolical plans for world domination, where I explain what happened when they imposed the green certificate to work, what they really did, which was an occult rite. The Last War of the Antichrist is a webinar, to tell the truth I never did it in person, where I explain and reveal the occult spiritual motives of what is happening today in the world at the geopolitical level. Between Russia, mainly, Ukraine, and now the Middle East is involved on the side. The present and future of the world according to the science of the spirit. Other topics. The friendship case, very well known. It's 9 webinars. It's the most in-depth study in the world on this great contact case that happened in Italy. The beautiful, fascinating topic of the hollow earth, which is ongoing. I'm holding it in Milan. About sacred geometry, I've already spoken. This seminar, The Immortal Prince and the Mysteries of Musine, Extraordinary Truths in the Time of the Great Revelation, is part of the Karma and Reincarnation cycle. Obviously, ufology could not be missing, especially in that initiative of the Pentagon to start talking about UFOs. Now they are closing it. They are taking everything back, because it was a diabolical project of dominion and deception. But since NATO has lost the war with Russia, there is no longer the possibility to do it as they had thought, and therefore, they deny everything. They published a document of 60 pages. The office in charge, which is called Arrow, to say that in reality, extraterrestrials do not exist. The 3 previous seminars, Moon Top Secret and NASA Manipulations on the Reality of Our Satellite, the second, Conquest of the Moon, The Hidden Truths, where I explain both the part that they created in studio and the real part of the lunar conquest, Stanley Kubrick, etc., etc. The last one I did is this, Alien Bases on the Moon, the evidence of extraterrestrial presence on our satellite. So let's say some parts have been taken from this last seminar. Well, so, the dramatic truth. With this video, I immediately reveal to you why we haven't returned to the moon. Don't be frightened.
Siete cascati, eh?
Because it's shocking and scary. You fell for it, eh? So, a detail. The farter was Italian. The moon is gray, right? All right. Don't get angry. So, the great ignored truth. Here we are serious. Fatima, October 13th, 1917. Satan reigns over the highest places, determining the course of things, so he could not fail to be present in the greatest adventure in the history of humanity. Still at Fatima on October 13th, 1917, and in that time cosmic beings will come from distant shores of the universe in the name of God. So Our Lady announces the cosmic era, the coming of extraterrestrials. But this phrase has been removed even from the so-called diplomatic text, because there is only one thing on which all the powerful of the world agree: to hide the truth of the extraterrestrial visit and of life in the cosmos, for only one reason: the concepts of high social and spiritual science that these beings bring would knock down all the powers of the world, and they know it very well. The war against extraterrestrials began since the early 40s. World War II wasn't even here yet, because the Americans recovered the first flying saucer in 1941. We have the declassified documents. In Italy, one was recovered in 1933, which then at the end of the war was taken by the Americans. Let's get to the heart of the Apollo missions. This is the logo, the pennant, of the Apollo program. Started in 1961, officially ended in 1975, but the last lunar flight was in 1972. I will discuss later in a future seminar the occult aspects that are present in this emblem. The Apollo missions have been these: Apollo 1, Apollo 7, Apollo 8, Apollo 9, Apollo 10, Apollo 11. This was the entire preparatory phase until the first moon landing. Then all the others arrived: Apollo 12, Apollo 13, which did not land because there was that famous incident. Houston, we have a problem. A phrase that has become famous. Apollo 14, Apollo 15, Apollo 16, Apollo 17, first flight, October 27, 1961, and last flight, December 7, 1972. And these are all the landing sites. Apollo 11 with Aldrin and Armstrong. Collins remained in orbit. Apollo 12, Apollo 13 had the accident, does not land. Apollo 14, 15, 16, and 17. So suddenly with Apollo 17, this is the crew, the lunar trips were interrupted. Yet in that period, after Apollo 11, going to the moon was like taking a taxi. In fact, they made these 6 trips because the gigantic expenditure and technical scientific enterprise to reach the moon had already been all paid for. It was just a matter of making the missiles, just in quotation marks, because anyway they had costs, putting in the fuel, preparing the astronauts and leaving. I remember that at the time. I was already passionate about these things. By now people didn't care anymore. They went and returned from the moon like the period of the shuttles, do you remember? Nobody cared anymore. Or like today, the International Space Station, what do? Who knows? Do you know what they do? They say what they want. So why, with this crew, these trips are interrupted? If they had become a routine? I was saying earlier, reviewing these things makes me feel like I'm living in the future, not in the past, because it was really a thing of unique grandeur. Yet the Apollo program had not concluded its course, which had been programmed even until Apollo 20. The crews had already been chosen. Further flights had been planned after Apollo 20 already in an advanced state of preparation. They gave justifications, their own. The cancellation was due to budget limits, organizational problems, and lack of political will, along with the diminished popular enthusiasm for lunar trips. But I know one thing that we have all experienced in a ferocious manner in these past years, that is, that with appropriate media manipulation campaigns, the emotions of the masses are easily moldable, and politicians obey powers that are much higher than them. So it is a justification for the ignorant population, but it is not the truth, because when power has in mind to do something, it does it, and that's it. It doesn't ask your permission. They sell you an ice cream, but in reality it's a cucumber. That is, they make it pass like that, so it cannot have been that logically. That is what they told us. That is budget limits, but they print the money. The United States prints, from nothing, $80 million per second. $80 million per second. Today, they have budget limits? No, Mario Draghi said it when he was asked in 2014 by a journalist. Can the ECB fail for lack of resources? And he first made his little laugh under the dragon's mustache that he has. Then he said the ECB cannot fail because it has unlimited resources. So why is there the light going out? Okay, it's a cinematic act, understood. So, if the ECB has unlimited resources, why don't we solve the world's problems? Poverty, lack of work, healthcare, because power must dominate the people and money is the whip it uses to command us. So these explanations are fine for the gullible, for the ignorant, but not for those who understand how things work. The very substantial expenses had already been sustained up to that moment to realize immense structures. America has made a crazy collective effort in that era to go to the moon because they had a president who had the attributes, who was John Kennedy. Unfortunately then, in 1963, the fact that he was a man of his word and honor cost him his life. So these justifications are absolutely ridiculous. Because the technological pipeline had been created, and it's there. The problem is not making the car, the problem is designing it, building the factory, hiring the workers, designing the machine. But once I have done all that, making the car becomes the easiest thing. Everything existed. The scientific and technical specializations of the personnel had all been achieved. The technical and computer equipment had been created, so don't sell me this story. There's something else that you haven't told me. So, as I said before, having reached success with Apollo 11, which had arrived on the moon with Armstrong and Aldrin, and Collins in orbit, for subsequent trips there was only to build a rocket. With everything, this little module here is what returned to Earth. This little triangle here, and all the rest was empty and disposable, but they worked perfectly. This is Apollo 15. They had built this gigantic, self-propelled tracked vehicle that from the interior of the building, where the missile was assembled, this one here, then went on the rails and brought the missile to the launch pad. And we have always seen this logic. Once the total system is built, launches are done with ease. How many times did the shuttles go, come, went, came? Then suddenly they neither went nor came anymore. Because there is a mystery that no one will ever tell you, which is that the plates needed to re-enter and not burn astronauts and shuttle were made by Rolando Palizza with Majorana's machine. And at a certain point, he told them, I won't make them for you anymore. Because a special alloy was needed that can be created only with that machine. And they had to abandon the shuttles and return to the old Soyuz of the Soviet era. Did shuttle flights ignite people's enthusiasm? Not at all. Like the flights of the Soyuz that carry astronauts and supplies to the International Space Station, they barely give the news, if not in sites or specialized publications. So that cannot be the justification. There must be another one. And as I said before, we know that if power decides something, it simply achieves it, because they create money from nothing. They have the best minds, the best scientific and technological structures, and therefore something else must have intervened. And they always achieve the objective at all costs, unless, being always a matter of power, something unforeseen and uncontrollable intervenes, perhaps a superior power. And we have a clear example in the conflict between NATO and Russia, because Russia has proven to be a superior military, organizational power, and as an analyst said, they are biting granite. It had never happened in the past 5 centuries that the Anglo-Saxon Empire, or Anglo-American better to say, found an enemy so difficult and invincible as Russia has been, even when by now almost people didn't care anymore about lunar trips. They were spending more on it. And so they designed the little electric cars. These are battery-powered electric cars with which they went on the moon. So, what logic are you selling me if they were spending more on it? Creating increasingly sophisticated technological components like these. And these advancements indicated, beyond the additional costs to realize them, the intention to create on the moon conditions for a stable human permanence. That is a base. You will say, but come on. What do you mean, but come on? Very few know that this project existed. Project Horizon, which was a military project for a permanent inhabited military lunar base, and it was conceived in the military field with the name of Project Horizon and was presented to the American Army Department on June 9, 1959. I was 4 months old, and the military planned to reach the moon by 1965. Project Horizon was structured in all its aspects. Even the Army believed that there were no known technical obstacles to the creation of a permanent, manned lunar base, and believed that the Horizon Project, their words, should be a special project with authority and priority, similar to the Manhattan Project of the Second World War, which was the project with which America realized the atomic bomb. Have you seen the movie? Oppenheimer? Have you seen it? So there was a military project of power. This was revealed for the first time by this gentleman whom I met personally, former Colonel Philip Corso, already passed to better life years ago, and who had requested the Horizon Project was General Trudeau, who was a hero general of the Korean War, who was head of the Research and Development Department. The Research and Development Department was led by this general, and his direct secretary was Philip Corso. And it was this office that managed the recovered alien technologies. And it was he in person who delivered to the great American industries like IBM the pieces of spacecraft recovered at Roswell to replicate them and insert them in the war pipeline, that is, war industry, and then in the commercial one. According to the revelations you will find in this book, Roswell, the day after. According to the revelations of former Colonel Philip Corso, to whom General Trudeau had delivered the project file, of which you saw before. The cover, the base was to serve as a military outpost, also equipped with atomic weapons both for deterrence towards terrestrial enemies, especially the Soviet Union at the time, but also to monitor from a privileged position the traffic of extraterrestrial means, and possibly attack them as they were considered hostile, because they violated with impunity the skies of the Earth and therefore were considered a danger to national security. Because the Americans had already since 1941 a flying saucer and knew very well that extraterrestrials came and went from Earth, so for them they were enemies. But this story no one has ever told us.
Ma questa storia non ce l'ha mai raccontata nessuno. Dopo, l'istituto militare che gestiva
So the military institute that managed the space discourse at the time was called NACA. Important thing, Philip Corso was one of those who set up the implant of that organization that was called Stay Behind or Gladio. He was there, in fact, in the anti-mafia documents his name emerges. Because that type of situations, together with the extraterrestrial ones, are kept at the highest levels of secrecy. So it seems a science fiction story, and instead it's all true. Read this book, and you will remain with your mouth open. That is they, when they talk about aliens, including Philip Corso, are angry. They see them as enemies. But these guys, this is our territory, our planet. What do they want? We must chase them away. So the Horizon Project was a fundamental project for American geopolitical and geospatial strategy. Then the NACA is closed, and NASA is created as a civilian entity. It happens in 1958. But in reality, who guarantees us that the Horizon Project was not carried on secretly disguised as a civilian project? No one guarantees it to us. In reality, in my opinion, exactly this happened. Because the strategic importance, both towards that moment of the Cold War and towards the extraterrestrials, has been declared. So the sudden cancellation of the Apollo program and of the lunar trips, never repeated until today with truly puerile justifications, may have unknown implications. It's a question, remained secret and unknown to the masses. Yes. I've already said it before, how is it possible? Apollo 11, Apollo 12, Apollo 13, Apollo 14, Apollo 15, Apollo 16, Apollo 17. Now they say we never went to the moon. It's all a deception. But if I want to make a deception, I don't go to make other 6 flights, because I will complicate in an abnormal way the possibility of maintaining the deception secret. Because if it was a deception and we never went there, I do one. All right, I close everything. We went beautiful by. And instead, no, they continued to spend money and to go and return from the moon. So it was already very risky to be discovered with a single mission. Imagine how much it would have become, I repeat, to maintain the deception by multiplying the number of flights, besides the fact that although all the pipeline had already been built, technicians prepared. Everything was ready, including the entire American industry that collaborated on the project. Making these became a useless expense. You spend to make a deception, but you have already succeeded. Close it immediately. So even those who think they have discovered the deception have fallen into the trap, and they have fallen naively for just one reason. Why? Do you believe one part of what power tells you, and then don't you believe another part? If power lies, it lies on both. Logically. So, more astronauts and personnel involved to convince to keep quiet, more false material to produce, more possibilities of errors and so on. And moreover, as already said, the flights planned even reached Apollo 20, and they intended to continue further. Why? Because they had to reach the permanent lunar base. So the lunar conspiracy theory, in my opinion, it was a typical maneuver of divide and rule through the strategy of distraction, that is, I create a false conspiracy that never existed, or that existed in an aspect convenient to them, to divert attention of the research from the real motivations that had caused the interruption of human flights. So what do? I throw a few poisoned baits, poisoned meatballs. I put up the idea of the flat earth, or the false conquest of the moon. So they will argue among themselves and no one deepens why in reality we didn't go. Now the discourse has its logic that is dictated by the same power, by its own admission It happened at the World Economic Forum of 2013. The discovery of alien life is the main danger for the elite that dominates the world. They say it themselves, because it is uncontrollable and because it is a superior power. So they organize themselves in every way to prevent this truth from becoming public domain. Having made all these reasonings as a premise to understand what the current scenario is, which is absolutely illogical, the lunar conspiracy is illogical. It has no logic if it had been a real conspiracy, I repeat. There is something else. And as we go forward, we will see it more and more clearly. So where does the lunar conspiracy come from? It arises with this book. We Never Went to the Moon by Bill Kaysing and Randy Reed. The first edition was self-published in '76, so the lunar flights had just ended 4 years earlier, and the Apollo project had been closed in '75, the year before. Kaysing is considered the initiator of the moon landing hoax movement, and in this book, he presented these ideas. From 1956 to 1963, Kaysing had worked for Rocketdyne, which was the company that had built those gigantic engines with which they went to the moon. It was a company closely associated with the lunar projects, and had designed and built the Saturn V rockets. Kaysing subsequently resigned, but the fact of having worked at Rocketdyne gave his arguments on the lunar hoax an appearance of credibility. But who guarantees me that Kaysing was not paid to do this? They offered him some money and he wrote the book and published it. So poisoned Meatball. In the book, Kaysing claims to have been aware of documents relating to the Mercury, Gemini, Atlas, and Apollo programs. Question: but one who works in a company that produces engines for NASA, but do they give him the projects of the missions? You're not a secret agent, unless you collaborate with the services and they make them available to you, because they have another goal to achieve. Otherwise, it's illogical. It's not that because I work at Fiat or I worked for the railways they gave me the projects of the trains or locomotives. So it's a story that doesn't stand up. So he says, I have these documents and it's clear that a hoax was implemented, and so the whole story of the lunar conquest was shot in film studios. He claims that everything was put together in a set located in the Nevada desert, by a cynical and ruthless United States government to distract attention from the ongoing disaster in Vietnam and to demonstrate once and for all America's superiority over the Soviet Union. But the Soviets weren't stupid. They too had observation structures, so the story wouldn't have held up. This is a photo of Rocketdyne with the gigantic Saturn V engines. Among the various deceptions, Kaysing describes the preparation for the launch as normal, but claims that the Rocketdyne F1 in the first stage of the Saturn V rocket were unreliable, he says. So what did they do? They put inside these large engines, more reliable engines used for the Atlas missile, which were secretly installed inside each of the 5 F1 of the Saturn V. But Kaysing, also for historical reasons, doesn't talk about some details. Apollo 1 never flew, because Apollo 1 is the name assigned to the Apollo Saturn 204 spacecraft, AS-204, destroyed by fire on January 27, 1967, during an exercise at Pad 34. And at the top was the re-entry module. The crew members all perished in the accident, that is, they burned alive. This is the inside of the cabin, so they burned alive on the ground, and they were these three. Grissom, white, and chaffy, if it is read like this. These 3 young men had this horrible death on top of the launch tower, inside that spacecraft. After the tragic accident of Apollo 1, NASA decided to undertake some missions without crew. The first was on November 9, '67 with Apollo 4 because they skipped, due to delays caused by the accident, Apollo 2 and Apollo 3. In this mission of Apollo 4, the Saturn V was used for the first time, that is this gigantic engine, and the tests went well. So casing tells me they were unreliable. And what did they do? They put those dummy engines in here too? It's nonsense. They tested them without crew on board. They worked. Let's move on. And these are the 5 engines that were mounted at the base of the main stage of the Saturn rocket. You see how big they are? This is Wernher von Braun, the Nazi criminal murderer who was put in charge. Dash of the American Lunar project. Do you know that NATO, when it was created, were put in command positions, especially Nazi hierarchs taken away from Germany? So NATO was Nazi from the beginning. And this is the assembly hall of the Saturns, you see? 5 engines and the main stage, which is the one that must develop the initial thrust to exit the gravity of planet Earth. January 2nd, 1968, Apollo 5 with a Saturn 1B rocket, and then Apollo 6 again with the Saturn V, launched on April 4, still in 1968. So they were engines that had been tested with various flights and all had gone well. So what casing says is absolutely a lie. All missions, I repeat, closed with success and demonstrated the reliability of the new Saturn V vector, which was the first in the world to have sufficient power to carry the space shuttle to the moon. But the most complicated and difficult part was to generate the initial thrust necessary to overcome the gravity of the Earth, because it is essential to achieve particular thrusts and speeds, otherwise the terrestrial gravity holds you here. Then what happens? Recently, not too recently, anyway, the founder and CEO of Amazon, Jeff Bezos, in 2013 sent a crew to the Atlantic Ocean to recover the engines. Those he could find, obviously, of the Apollo missions that were dropped into the ocean. And that allowed the landing on the moon. In 3 weeks at sea, they recovered various finds. In this photo, still resting on the ocean floor, we see the nozzle of a Saturn V engine in the Atlantic Ocean. These are the workers who clean up. This is the thrust chamber, so they were gigantic engines. So the effort to design and build an engine that could generate that power of thrust was a gigantic challenge. For example, the Soviets didn't succeed because all the tests they did all exploded, and in the end, they gave up. This is the thrust chamber and the fuel manifold still of the Saturn V. They were really impressive engines. Gas generator and manifold of the Saturn V, heat exchanger. This is the complete Saturn, and these are the pieces that have been recovered, so they were really crazy engines. And today they are exhibited after the obvious cleanings at the Museum of Flight in Seattle in the state of Washington. But of the phantom boosters, as casing said hidden inside, there was nothing, so it was a lie. But since in that era there was the challenge, there was the competition between the United States and the Soviet Union, the Soviets, not being able to build such a powerful engine as the Saturn to send a crew to the moon, contented themselves with sending a parallel mission to the moon with a robotic probe, which was this, Luna 15. So the lunar journey of Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins was parallel to that of the Soviet probe, without crew, Luna 15. NASA launched Apollo 11 towards the moon on July 16, 1969. The Soviet Union launched Luna 15 first on July 13th. The purpose of the initially secret mission was to be, that is, they say, well, we won't be able to bring the astronauts. Maybe we'll take the primacy of being the first human probe to land on the moon. to collect lunar soil samples and return them to Earth. Maybe we'll beat them on time. This is the official story. But perhaps the Soviet Union in reality just wanted to spy on what would happen during the journey of Apollo 11, and perhaps knew something else? Yes, it knew something else. That is the Soviets, who also knew about the extraterrestrial visit, feared that in a neutral territory, the Moon, the Americans would come to an agreement with the extraterrestrials to trick them.
Quindi il vero scopo del Luna 15 era monitorare tutto il viaggio lunare.
So the real purpose of Luna 15 was to monitor the entire lunar journey, what was happening while the American astronauts were on board. In fact, Luna 15, for the entire duration of the stay of Collins, Aldrin and Armstrong on the Moon, spied on the astronauts, because the Soviets feared this. There was even an agreement, made personally with Khrushchev, between Khrushchev and the CIA, and Khrushchev kept everything hidden from the Politburo, where they came to an agreement. After the scandal of the shooting down of the U-2 spy plane, they came to an agreement, because the CIA said, "We want to test some satellite cameras. With very high resolution, do you allow us to photograph the Soviet Union without shooting down the satellite?" In exchange, the CIA tells him, "We with this instrument will provide you all the information on extraterrestrial landings on Soviet soil." They make the agreement, secret between Khrushchev and the CIA, but it is kept hidden from the Soviet government, that is the Communist Politburo. So already from then they feared the extraterrestrial presence. And the Soviets precisely feared that the Americans, on the Moon, where they knew very well that there are aliens, would find an agreement to trick and defeat the Soviet Union. But I will talk about this a lot in the next seminars. The mission was quite anomalous. There would have been, in fact, 2 spaceships in simultaneous flight towards the Moon, both transmitting radio signals to Earth, so Luna 15 and Apollo 11, and NASA feared that there could have been interferences that would have dangerously disturbed the most crucial moments of the human flight towards our satellite. Luna 15 approached the Moon on July 17, 1969, 3 days before Apollo 11, which will land on July 20th, and made 52 orbits during the stay on lunar soil of Armstrong and Aldrin. But all these things were followed by the radio telescopes, where at that time the most powerful was this, that of Jodrell Bank in England, which received the signals from both missions, Apollo 11 and Luna 15. In the end, the Russian probe crashed on the soil of the Earth's natural satellite. That is, they tried the soft landing, assuming this was a real intention, and the probe crashed. And since the Soviet Union had already made other lunar probes land, the little story that they had to collect samples for me is all a hoax. In reality, they wanted to spy if there had been an agreement between aliens and Americans. The recordings made of the 2 probes, that is, Apollo 11 and Luna 15, were made precisely by Jodrell Bank and were kept secret until 2009. Then they published all these documents on the 40th anniversary of the first human moon landing in history. But not only Jodrell Bank. In Italy, we had characters who at the time made a huge noise, who were the Giudica Cordelia brothers, Achille and Giovanni Battista. These were very passionate radio amateurs and invested a lot of money. They had the possibility and fascinated Italy and the world with their interceptions of communications between ground stations and Soviet and American space pilots, made with their own equipment, often even self-produced by them. These brothers were brilliant and installed in Piedmont, in the Turin area. They even developed techniques for tracking and tracing satellites that amazed NASA technicians for some of their brilliant solutions. In fact, they had problems because the secret services didn't like this story. For example, they recorded the last moments of life of a Soviet woman astronaut who burned to death in space and who doesn't exist in history. There was a problem. You can actually hear the screams of this astronaut. It's hot. I can't take it anymore. I see the fire. And then dead silence. Because this poor woman is dead. But she doesn't exist. Russia has never officially recognized this thing. And so the Soviets got angry. And the KGB went to find the Cordiglia brothers. So from Yuri Gagarin, first man to be launched into space, a Soviet, until Apollo 11 passing through the dramatic secret missions of the Soviets, where some died. They were witnesses of the golden period of the race to the moon. And obviously the crowning of all this work lasted years, was the conquest of the moon. Therefore, Achille and Giovanni Battista Giudica Cordiglia, you see in the end they built almost a small NASA in their laboratory and made of Apollo 11 a 12-hour live broadcast on behalf of Swiss-Italian radio, in connection both with Florida and with the Apollo spacecraft. That is connected in the sense that they were connected to the radio band while it was completing the historic enterprise on the moon. And this was possible thanks to their radio telescope of 8 meters in diameter, tuned to the frequencies of the American lunar mission. So, beyond all a gigantic set of evidence, the discourse of the lunar conspiracy, if one studies it a bit, doesn't hold up. So this is a small splash of history to enter and understand that hiding the deception, because they say they launched the Apollos, they remained in orbit and then returned to Earth. Everyone would have understood it. That is, it would have been a scandal because the Cordiglia brothers didn't care about personal risks when they published The Voice of the Female, Soviet astronaut dead in space. Therefore, the problem is another. Is it established that extraterrestrials are on Earth? Yes. George Adamski, very famous photo. George Adamski. Howard Menger, landing with female pilot coming out of the spacecraft. Paul Villa, beautiful photo of June 16, 1963. Gaspare de Lama, Treno Milan 1962. Antonio Giannuzzi, Lecce, Italy 75. He took these 3 photos, but he saw nothing. He was in the company of Eugenio Siragusa, who told him, shoot there, shoot there, shoot there. Then when he developed the photos, this disc came out, which has a transparent dome that passes from the physical state to the energy state because flying saucers are not spaceships, but are hyperdimensional ships, that is, they can change vibratory frequency. Billy Meyer, July 9, 1975. And the great Juan Manuel Sanchez, Juanito Juan, Valle Hermoso, Mexico, August 17, 2022. Flying saucer, Google, marks this little house, Casa del OVNI. Go on Google Maps, put Casa del OVNI, and it gives it to you because now it's a pilgrimage destination. And these are the 3 shots that made Juanito Juan famous. We hear from each other every other day because I have been in Mexico with him, an absolutely real case. And obviously the extraterrestrials have followed the lunar missions and have given information. This is Eugenio, my spiritual father. This is the cover of the Domenica del Corriere that illustrates Eugenio's physical encounter on April 30th, 1962 with extraterrestrials. Message on the moon, important communication. Some of our very large spaceships continuously stay in the high layers of the Earth's atmosphere and others in the underground hangars of the bases that we have since time on the Earth satellite moon. These ships are on continuous alert and very ready to perform, always in case of open conflict between nuclear powers, the total or partial absorption of any form of energy produced on Earth, in order to immobilize in a timely and efficient way all means of communication. That is this if an atomic exchange would occur. The message is from the very distant November 8th, 66, so we are before the human landing on the moon. Adonaisis has asked me to disclose to all scientists and scholars of the planet Earth what I communicate below. Our space bases, installed millennia ago on your satellite, exactly 175,000 years, are located in the lunar hemisphere visible from Earth. The areas that offer greater security are those surfaces that on Earth you call seas. In these areas, there are few possibilities of collapses due to the particular nature of the elements that compose the surface and to the internal structures of the substrate of the crust, particularly pressed by the sighted magnetic lines. Then if the force of the moon raises the oceans of the Earth, imagine the force of the Earth. What kind of mechanical stress activates on the lunar soil? So the lunar tides are earthquakes. And because of these pressure lines, the areas called seas are pressed. So let's say they are much more resistant because the majority of lunar craters are not meteoric impacts, but are collapses because the moon has its own physiology. This is George Adamski with his famous photo that we have seen before. And Adamski has often photographed extraterrestrial ships near the moon. This is a photo, between 50 and 51. This is a mothership, cigar-shaped. Here we have a classic flying saucer in energy phase. Another flying saucer in energy phase, and this is the moon. On page 171 of his second book, Inside the Flying Saucers, Adamski tells of his journey in lunar orbit aboard a flying saucer, made many years before, so in the 50s, the human landing on our satellite. This is a brief extract.
Questo è un breve estratto.
Ramu told me,
"Now, you are seeing the face of the moon that is visible from Earth, but we are not landing. The image is being reflected on the screen from one of the telescopes that was functioning when you came here the first time. Observe carefully while we approach the surface, and you will notice considerable activity. In the great craters that are visible from Earth, you will notice many very large hangars that from Earth can't be seen. And also observe that here the soil is very similar to that of your deserts. We have built these hangars so that spaceships much larger than this one can easily enter. In the hangars there are also accommodations for a large number of workers and for their families. They are equipped with all the comforts. Water is brought in abundance by means of pipes that come from the mountains, exactly as you have done on Earth, with the aim of making desert areas fertile. When a spaceship enters one of the hangars, a procedure takes place to depressurize the passengers. It requires approximately 24 hours. If this were not done, the passengers would find themselves greatly uncomfortable in exiting onto the moon. It is a depressurization procedure that is not yet conceivable for terrestrials. They understand still too little of bodily functions and their control. In reality, human lungs are capable of adapting to both very low and very high pressures. If inhalation and exhalation are not carried out too quickly, if they are hurried, they can cause death.
I would have been happy to undergo the necessary depressurization just to have the privilege of landing on the moon. There was nothing that required an immediate return to Earth. But with a smile of understanding, Ramu said,
We have many things in store for you, including showing you the other face of the satellite before taking you back to Earth.
I'm negotiating a small apartment there. And then I ordered 3 crates of lunar tomatoes. They told me they are very good. I myself creating, then I made another one of 10 minutes on Menger's experience, and that Menger actually landed on the moon. And I myself, who know these things, however, creating them also out of fantasy, I said, it's all true, damn, but what kind of life do we lead here in our world? But what life do we live? Well, we have to be patient because the process is underway. So Ramu, this extraterrestrial, tells Adamski, you see everything that is there, so there is a huge activity. Now Adamski is attacked. He's a buffoon. He's a sausage maker. The flying saucer was the lid of a gas lantern and all these nonsense. But if there is activity, we have telescopes. During the last 200 years, there have been casually observed with telescopes. During the study of the moon, strange phenomena like bright patches, bright points, intermittent lights, objects near our natural satellite, as we have seen, in Adamski's photos and more, they have been seen and studied by prestigious scientists like Herschel, Schroeder, Haas, Moore, blah blah blah, etc., etc. And they have been called transient lunar phenomena, TLP. Just from the Monte Mario Observatory, more than 600 have been counted. Monte Mario in Rome. Let me read you a very small selection. February 11th, 1824. From 5 in the morning, an enormous beam of light turns on intermittently in the shadowed part of the moon. The phenomenon lasts a few minutes. December 25th, 1835, in the Aristarchus crater, which then we'll see, remember it, a very vivid red light shines like a star. This phenomenon will repeat other times. 1836, February 13th, in the shadowed part of the moon, 2 parallel strips of light are observed between which many bright points are symmetrically arranged. 1860, the year before the foundation of Italy, May 4th. The bottom of the Lunar crater inexplicably changes color, becomes white while distinct and bright spots are observed in the center. 1867, June 10th, in the lunar region of Sulpicius Gallus. 3 black spots with sharp contours appear, very visible, which remain so until the 13th, so 3 days, then disappear. 1870, September 26, the passage in front of the moon of a dark object, very clear, having the form of an ellipse, is observed. 1867, April 9th, many bright points appear in the shadowed part of the moon. 1873, the lunar disk is crossed several times by a large number of bright globes. 1874, 4 flying objects in movement between the Earth and the Moon are photographed while their silhouette is outlined against the background of the satellite about which research is being carried out. 1874, April 24th, from the lunar surface objects of dazzling splendor detach themselves heading at great speed toward space. 1875, July 13th, a luminous ray like the beam of a titanic reflector is projected into space from the lower edge of the moon. November 23rd, on the bottom of the Plato crater, an equilateral luminous triangle forms. Other bright points appear in the surrounding areas. Then they move converging towards the crater and then disappearing into the triangle. 1822. 2 dark triangles appear on the upper edge of the moon which, moving from 2 different points, meet and disappear. And we go on. 1896, April 4th. The lunar surface is again crossed by a dark elliptical shape. The duration of the passage has been calculated at 4 seconds. 1896, July 31st, a dark spherically shaped body crosses the lunar disk. 1912, January 27th, astronomer Harris observing the moon sees pass in front of it a dark object of dimensions that he judges enormous. 1915, January 13th, in the lunar region of Littrow, 7 bright points appear that arrange themselves in a row, forming the Greek letter gamma. 1917, August 20th, the moon is crossed for the umpteenth time by a bright disk. 1919, February 12th, in the lunar region of Furnarius, an enormous, perfectly straight luminous beam is projected towards space. 1930. On various occasions, astronomer Pickering has noticed color changes and moving dark shapes in the Eratosthenes crater. 1950, various English astronomers of the Wilkins Group discovered dozens of strange, white cone-shaped structures with opaque reflections about 20 meters or more tall. The cones are perfectly regular judging from their shadows. Such structures are called domes, which means cupolas. 1954, November 8th, near the edge of the Kepler crater, a red glow is observed. 58 November, for about 30 seconds, a red glow is observed on the bottom of the Alphonsus crater. And these are only some. So when astronomers like Margarita Hack tell us, but we don't see anything, either she is a liar or she is ignorant. I made a program on Rai 3, I think, where there was Luca Giurato. I was in the studio, and Margarita Hack intervened in connection from Trieste. At a certain point, she says some nonsense precisely of those deadly ones. And I ask for the floor. Excuse me, Luca, can I comment on Dr. Hack's statements? Of course, go ahead, Caria. Excuse me, doctor, but look, but you have said some solemn nonsense. It's not as you say. And she gets irritated and bursts out, but I don't have time to study these nonsense. Then I told her, but excuse me, if you are not a person informed about the facts, why are you here talking? And she goes, boom, and they closed the connection. That is, she admitted that she knew nothing about it. But they called her because at Rai they do so. But it's not just Monte Mario, it's everywhere. For example, this is a NASA catalog from 1967, dedicated to the cases of transient lunar phenomena. Look at the map a bit. All the little red stars are the points of the moon, where NASA has seen these phenomena. So the moon is inhabited, as Adonisis says. For 175,000 years, we have the photos. This is a TLP of November 15th, 1953, photographed between Pallas and Schroeder by Leon Stewart. Schroeder is very important because there is activity, and this is a transient lunar phenomenon filmed by the astronauts of Apollo 10, so the trip before the landing of Apollo 11. The image is upside down, then we'll straighten it, you see? There is this immense glow, now slowed down to 50%. The image is inverted, the Earth is above, and you see a gigantic glow, shot by the astronauts of Apollo 10, frame by frame, still inverted image. So, friends, it is obvious that if all this happens, scientists who know observe and follow, so, in those environments, the extraterrestrial presence is an open secret. But this activity, considering the large number of terrestrial probes sent, has also been photographed. Let's see an example. Then I repeat in the seminars there are several, many others. This is the Vitello crater, photographed by Lunar Orbiter 5 in 67. So the lunar orbiters were 5, because they had the task of mapping and photographing the entire surface of the moon, because they had to choose a non-dangerous point for the descent. Because, for example, the LEM could not land on the edge of the crater and then fall in. So they had to find a flat point. In fact, there was an Apollo trip where they landed a bit badly, and the nozzle of the LM rocket was dented, because there was a protruding rock, a little. From the ground, it was not possible to understand it because high-resolution photos would be needed, and when they landed, the nozzle hit this rock and was squashed. Thank God it did not ruin the efficiency of the engine. So this is an area of the Vitello crater, which is a nice crater, 42 kilometers in diameter. And the area is this. Then there is a concept that there is no time to explain here, which is the resolution in pixels. But now we will understand it from the photo. So in the photos of Lunar Orbiter 5, this object is captured, which leaves this trace here, and this object which leaves this trace here. Now what do SciCap and others say? But it's obvious. They are rolling boulders. You know that on Earth there is the phenomenon of boulders that walk by themselves? No, it's true. It's not a joke. There is a desert area, now I don't remember where, that due to the very strong temperature differences where at night the humidity freezes, so between expansion and contraction the boulders travel long distances. So, CCAP, which is the abbreviation for doesn't understand anything, have said that they are rolling boulders. Obviously, the function of SciCap is consciously to lie always at all costs, whatever it takes. Let's examine the section of the first object. You see that the trace is regular? Let's say it seems the trace of an object that advances like this. Let's look at the detail of the trace. Here the object makes a curve. This is a promontory. Here there is a depression also quite deep because there is shadow. This is a promontory, then here it descends. There is again a dip. Here there is another promontory. This is the shadow of the tracks, so they are very deep tracks. And this is the high and sharp shadow of this object that has a surface. See how much lighter it is than all the surrounding ground, so it's called albedo. Albedo is the percentage of light that a surface reflects. So the albedo of this object is higher than the albedo of the lunar soil, which is about 7%. The soil of the moon reflects 7% of the sunlight it receives. So this apparently small trace in reality is almost 3 kilometers. The shadow of the object is 490 meters long and the object is 140 meters wide. Now that a boulder of 140 meters can roll by itself, only those of SciCap can believe it, because precisely they don't understand anything. And here there is this rectangular object, very clear, which in front of this structure will be at least 50 meters, so it could be a nice shed. And then you see here that there is a section. This is the main object. Obviously, it's not the precise shape of the object because the brightness distorts its shape a bit. But here there is an external section, you see a bit pointed, which could be the mechanism, one that advances and that precisely makes this movement here. So it is a gigantic self-propelled vehicle 140 meters wide, because the resolution in pixels, in this case I believe it was either 1 meter or 2 meters, so if an object is 2 meters large we don't see it because it's 1 pixel. It doesn't give us any kind of detail. To have details we should have a pixel resolution, enormously higher. Let's look at the second object because the orbiters make the orbit so they draw a photographic strip, then they pass again, and make one next to it, one next to it, one next to it. Then all these photos are composed and create the whole. So here you see. First passage, the object had arrived here. At the second passage, it has traveled another piece of road and is here. Second vehicle. Let's analyze it in the same way. Ascent, S-curve, descent. 4 kilometers of route, and the object projects a shadow of 90 meters and has a width of about 40 meters. Imagine a bulldozer of 40 meters or whatever it is. They are enormous things. So on the moon there is activity, but there are so many of these photos. There is activity, and these photos demonstrate it, and they are photos precisely from 1967. So on the moon there is extraterrestrial activity, structures, machinery, accommodations, bases, hangars, there is everything. Because if we, from the modern era, have built skyscrapers all over the planet, imagine what the extraterrestrials will have built on the moon in 175,000 years. There will be everything. And obviously, they know. So they tell us that the moon is gray, but I have only seen the gray moon in NASA photos. In movies, in TV series, and that's it. Because the moon in the sky is not gray, the moon is yellow. Have you ever seen the gray moon in the sky? No, it's yellow. Yet they have put this moon here in our heads. But already between this and this there is an abysmal difference. This is the hidden face of the moon, always rigorously gray. Now there is the lunar orbiter. And they always publish the photos in black and white. NASA photo. They tell you it's gray, but if you observe it well, it's not so gray. It has a slight tone of brownish. Gray, gray. Then the Chinese arrive. Oops. The U2 rover, which has nothing to do with YouTube, lands on December 14, 2013, and after a few hours, cut off because the Americans say, but how? We spent a sea of money to put in people's heads that the moon is gray. But this is a fat soil. It makes you want to plant beans, onions. It's a nice fat soil. I am the son of farmers. A soil like this has substance. So the Americans got angry, and in my opinion, they turned off the rover because the moon is not gray. The moon is brown. So we returned to NASA photos. That is, the moon is brown. The moon has the colors of the Earth. Why on the moon iron, magnesium, calcium, all minerals should have a different color. That is bleached, grizzled. So it's a manipulation, but not because they are interested or care a bit. About the color of the moon, the reason is another, and we will discover it. So we return to NASA photos, Apollo 10 photo. Just increase the color with Photoshop, and here comes out the color of the moon. This is the original photo in very high resolution published in an Apollo archive only a few years ago. Even here it is hypersaturated. But if I balance the colors, you see, it's brownish. Then there is another important fact. Photos on the moon do not respond like photos taken on Earth, because on the moon photons behave differently. So even the color that is given by photons doesn't come exactly as a photo on Earth would come, but it's sufficient to understand that they have taken us for a ride. Photo of Apollo 12, you see, if I saturate the color comes out. So all these photos have been manipulated continuously because they had to put in humanity's head that the moon is gray. This is even a brief video of Apollo 12, which landed in an area with a nice fat soil. Really soil for beans, potatoes, and peas. You see, there's a nice brown. Look. This is an original video from the NASA archive, not that I took it from conspiracy sites. Apollo 13, which didn't land, April 11th, 70, April 17th, 70. Orbital photo of the moon. You see, I give it color and it comes out that the moon is not gray. Apollo 14, original colors. It seems gray. I saturate and instead, the brown comes out. Apollo 15 original colors. You see here it seems gray, but if I saturate, the true color of the lunar soil comes out. Apollo 16, same story. Apollo 17, last mission, you see what a nice brown color. So they have taken us for a ride. Look at this other photo. They dug and this nice orange soil came out, you see? So why did they take us for a ride? Why did they take us for a ride? Look at this photo. Here they really made a nonsense. Earth in color, moon gray. But expanding the photo, at the pixel level, it came out that they overlapped badly, and on the side, there is a line of pixels that was covered with a desaturated moon, even badly placed because it's a bit above and a bit shifted to the side. So, they manipulate them. Even you see the edge of the Earth is all jagged, and so they cut out the Earth badly. They cut out the moon, they removed the color, they re-overlapped and erased all the space with a nice black Pantone. Then just go on Google Images, type sand and lunar rocks. Lunar sand, black, yellow, lunar rock brown and white, lunar rock brownish, lunar rock very brown, lunar rock slightly brown. However, in people's heads, if you ask, what color is it? It's gray. Secret dialogues of astronauts. So the dialogues broadcast on networks, let's say, uncoded, were coded in advance before departure. That is, they could not use certain words. They were almost scripts memorized. This to prevent, knowing very well that there is extraterrestrial activity, the astronauts from speaking due to surprise or emotion about things they saw, but that had to remain secret to the public. Therefore, everything that was heard by people during the worldwide television and radio live broadcasts was a kind of great fiction, saying true things, obviously, but hiding what wanted to be hidden. It's the teleprompter. Then when they turned off, on board, they had the black boxes, which are these devices here. In moments when public communications with Earth were not active, the astronauts could talk freely about what they saw during the flight. These dialogues were recorded by two black boxes, the DSE, data storage equipment, on board the Orbital Lunar Module, this, and the DSEA, data storage electronics assembly, on board the Lunar Module LEM. This is the DSE on board the Command and Service Module, and this is the DSEA on board the LEM, which was smaller obviously because the spaces of the LEM were very reduced. Then what did NASA do? Once the astronauts returned to Earth, they took the tapes both from the Command Module and from the LEM and transcribed them. All this material, which is 40,000 pages, was then published, so they do these somewhat strange things. First everything's secret and then they publish. But nobody knows anyway. Who goes to look for these things? Except Caria and a few others. And they created this site where there are the transcriptions of all the secret dialogues of the Mercury, the Gemini, the Apollo, the Skylab, the Apollo-Soyuz, the Space Shuttle, the Shuttle Mir, and the International Space Station. And these are the PDF files, transcribed, and they are, among other things, manipulable PDFs. That is, if you do copy and paste, you can copy the texts. It's a bit troublesome, because anyway, they are all typed. At that time, there were no computers. And this is the link to access this site. Now, I talked about this fact in the last seminar, and after a few days, this site was deactivated. It no longer worked. In fact, people who had copied the link wrote to me saying, "Korea, but it's not true, there's nothing." I said, "But what are you saying?" "But they will be the usual idiots who don't know how to use the computer." I went to verify. The page didn't exist. I said, "What is this? Does the CIA spy on my seminars?" Then I tried the other day. They put it back online, but there are some changes, so I don't know if they have sanitized these files from what was uncomfortable. And in one of these files, which is the file AS17PAO on page 1539, we are in the theme color of the moon. The astronaut says, "In the vicinity of Sulpicius Gallus, which is this crater, there are several small craters that appear to be impact craters that, believe it or not, have to my eyes anyway orange ejection blankets." From Earth, I understand. Astronaut. Yes, Ron says that on those he has already commented and they seem very obvious to me. No, I don't know. No, I think you can't with those. It's spoken, obviously. We'll have a good view of them again in one of the next positions. Orbital ones, I add. It's of a light orange, obviously, which is in contrast with the gray-brown of the dark blanket in the vicinity of Sulpicius Gallus. There's a good specimen right there now that looks like a constructive cone. It's orange. And this is right on a raised projection of the gray-brown dark blanket out on the light blue-gray annular material. Hey then, what had Ramu told Adamski in the 50s? So more than 10 years before. And observe further that the soil is very similar to that of your deserts. It was true. Then photographic techniques improve, and these two astronomers passionate about photography, Andrew McCarthy, resident of Arizona, and planetary scientist and fellow space photographer Connor Mathern worked together to create the image of the moon as a collaborative tribute to NASA's upcoming Artemis mission. McCarthy and Mathern's project, started in November 2021, assembled more than 2,000 individual shots into a single image, which is beautiful. This is the true color of the moon. Is there the T-shirt of the moon with the true colors? We have the printed T-shirt. Look at those colors. You see the blue-gray the astronaut was talking about, the browns, the oranges. All photos were taken in a single evening, with the pair then spending 9 months modifying and compiling their work to realize the finished product. McCarthy explained that while he was taking thousands of photos, which revealed very sharp details of the lunar surface, Mathern focused on the colors of the moon. McCarthy said that for their lunar photo shoot they used only basic equipment that anyone can buy in a store of astronomical equipment. A camera, a tripod, and a star tracker, so motorized. The main requirement was the patience to wait for perfect sky conditions, free from light pollution. And this is the moon. Look, you see the blues, the light blues? Look how beautiful. Why don't we see the colors of the moon? It's a very easy technical concept. Since the moon receives a lot of sunlight, the colors disappear because the yellow color of the light dominates. So whoever is capable enough at the photographic level can literally enter into the brightness of the moon and from Earth photograph the truth. So why, to this day, NASA's space probes, very advanced, publish us photos like this? Because from Earth we see the colors, but we don't see the extraterrestrial installations. Mr. Howard Menger is taken to the moon around 1956, American contactee, and in this book, which in Italy has never been published. I was in negotiation with Menger's wife. He was already dead. We were reaching an agreement to publish it also here in Italy. Then she died, unfortunately. The heir who took over this document made me requests that were out of mind, I told him, but go to the moon. And this is a photo taken by Menger in the 50s aboard the flying saucer of the lunar surface. You see? Here's the edge of the porthole of the flying saucer. Photo of the moon at the end of the 50s. And here Menger says something. The white part are clouds. Are clouds? They are clouds. And when he lands, he takes photos. He had a Polaroid, poor thing. And photographs a dome of protection of the extraterrestrial installations and a flying saucer that was landing. And this is the lunar surface. Do you notice a detail? Which? What color is the sky of the moon? The photo is in black and white. What color is the sky of the moon if we look at it from Earth? This is a test to make you understand how much our mind is manipulated. What color is the sky of the moon? How black? It's yellow. It's yellow. Holy heaven, you see it's yellow? Where is it black? It's yellow, we see it from here. What color is the Earth from space? Blue. And so, the sky of the moon, what is it? Have you understood the manipulation? That is, you see reality, but in your head, they have put a black sky. And you see it black even if you have never seen the moon with a black sky, because it would not be visible. If it had a black sky, we wouldn't see it. You have to reason in an elastic way. It's a preview because then I'll talk in a future event about the sky of the moon. How long does the Earth day last? How long does the lunar day last? 28 days. The astronauts always went to the moon at dawn. Because there was the least thermal excursion. So the light of dawn is not noon. The astronauts of Apollo 11 remained on the moon for 2 hours. In reality more, because there was the meeting with the extraterrestrials that was hidden. But they go down, stay 2 hours and come back home because in those 5 hours in which they told us they were sleeping, they consumed all the oxygen. And when one sleeps, his beats don't go between 120 and 160.
E quando uno dorme, I battiti non gli vanno tra 120 e 160. Quindi il cielo della luna non è nero.
So the sky of the moon is not black. It is simply the effect of the camera in a contrast of a sky not very bright at dawn. The violent light reflected from the ground makes me disappear. The color of the sky, just as during the day the light of the sun makes the stars disappear. But in reality, they have manipulated there too. And so Howard Menger in 1956, I believe, photographs the moon. And you know what he says when he descends from the flying saucer? Ah, what a beautiful sky, the color of saffron. Now you will be disappointed. Lunar Probe Clementine, official name Deep Space Program Science Experiment, launched on January 25, 1994. We already had color cameras. The probe stopped transmitting data in June 1994 due to a failure. It had on board a high-resolution color camera. Do you remember Project Horizon? Okay. The project is that is the disturbing aspect is that the mission of Clementine was jointly designed by NASA and the Ballistic Missile Defense Organization, which is the one that managed the space shield of the Reagan era. That is, it's a military department that previously had been called Strategic Defense Initiative. SDI, that is the entity in charge of the military project of the space shield that served to shoot at the flying saucers that arrived on Earth. And this is the so-called Space Shield, Strategic Defense Initiative. And these are the extraterrestrial objects that must be shot down. Clementine mission, therefore managed by the military, officially together with NASA. Then they go to publish the photos. Look what a mess. With these erasures. Really almost made with the finger. Look. Despite the very high quality of Clementine's cameras, the photos published by NASA are of very poor quality. In fact, in black and white, with very visible manipulations. Look here. Now, let's see the photos of the Aristarchus crater. Do you remember from the list of the Monte Mario Observatory what they saw from Aristarchus? This is the Aristarchus crater photographed by Clementine. It's not gray. And Aristarchus shines. Look at this trail. About 42 kilometers. Look here, this is a photo. Another photo. It shines much more. This structure and this structure, here they are not very bright. Look here. They are on. You see there is the trail, there is this structure, the trail, this structure, which is this structure, which is this. It's a dome. And this is another dome that shines with light here, but takes light, you see, from two directions. And this one here, the same, takes reflected light from here. This is a photo of Aristarchus in the ultraviolet range, done by the European Space Agency. And practically an ultraviolet, it has the same structure. Of type, I don't know if hexagonal or pentagonal, of Aristarchus. Look, they are the same thing. Official photo of Aristarchus. Black and white like this. It looks like a septic tank in the courtyard. But there are small photographic tricks, very banal, look a bit. Plop. What does this have to do with this thing? Nothing. So manipulation, and now we see a selection of photos made by Clementine. Moon this unknown, look. Celestial craters? Terminator, day zone, night zone. Why does it shine here? What is this structure? With this nice bluish light. And this object here, what is it? It's what is under Aristarchus. You see the trail of Aristarchus? Aristarchus is here. We see it clearer. You see that here there is a point of reflection, so this is a reflective structure, or even this is an entrance from which light comes out. Look at Aristarchus, here it's so bright that it actually burns the photograph. Here is the previous object. Look at any photo of the moon. It's full of bright things, super full, because 175,000 years of activity. The moon is full of stuff. But if you remove the color, you don't understand anything anymore. You don't see anything. Look at these illuminated domes. Look here. Have you understood why they had to remove the color? And how do you hide all this stuff? Finding these photos is almost impossible. They published an archive that weighs a few gigabytes. They are 3 archives. They invented a form of compaction so abstruse. I asked a friend of mine who is a computer programmer. He went crazy to unpack these files, and in the end there are nonsense. Because these photos at very high resolution, you can't find them. Look here. Look at the brightness of this edge. Look here. Look here, it's full of stuff, it's chock full. Look here, what is this thing here? Look here. They had to make it gray. Look here. Look here how this area reflects this other. Is it clear now the discourse of why it was necessary to make the moon gray? Because it's full of extraterrestrial stuff and they continue to publish us these stupid photos. In 2024, of probes that cost millions of dollars, and they mount on board the Lumiere brothers' camera. But go to hell. Now we have seen what the moon is and all the activity that is there. We begin to understand that on the moon, nothing has been conquered. Let's see what the terrestrials have combined. Let's go to the period of the race to the moon. So, after having verified the presence of extraterrestrial civilizations on the moon, let's see some historical facts known publicly that can be only a part of the causes that have pushed these beings to forbid further lunar missions on our natural satellite. The hypothesis remains that something similar to the Horizon project was carried forward also by NASA, and that has contributed to the lunar embargo on Earthlings. And we see the concordance of what the astronauts do on the moon with the messages that Eugenio Siragusa receives from the extraterrestrials. Let's go step by step, date by date. Let's see the crazy seismic experiments of the Apollo missions and the admonitions of the occult protagonist, which are the extraterrestrials. Let's start from Apollo 11. Departure July 16th, 69, and moon landing July 20th, 69. Return July 21st, 69, and splashdown July 24th. That is return, departure from the moon. Buzz Aldrin. Next to the seismometer they placed on the moon. Solar panels open for operation, and the antenna is pointed towards the Earth. Further on, you can see the laser reflector, which is this here. It was put because with the laser beam they pointed on this contraption, the laser is reflected, and you can measure to the millimeter the distance between Earth and Moon, moment by moment. This seismometer has been used to study the propagation of seismic waves through the Moon caused by meteoric impacts, and has provided the first detailed analyses of the internal structure of the satellite, which is, like the Earth, hollow. Message from the extraterrestrials to the men of Earth, scientists and pilots of the spaces. The day of departure, July 16th, 69. No. Of landing? No, of the journey. They are on the journey because they landed on the 20th and left on the 14th. They are on the journey to the moon. The extraterrestrials say, accept with pure sense of religiosity the conquests of your intelligence, and have scrupulous and conscious care to put them at the service of the good and prosperity of all humanity of your planet. Be humble and look with sincere devotion at the light of eternal truth that benignly reveals itself and extends to you its invisible and generous arms, light of eternal truth, because on the moon they had programmed a meeting. Do not raise yourselves as fools used to do, but be simple and pure of heart, to be more welcome to the things greater than you that, mysteriously, push you towards a better destiny. That is, the extraterrestrials have helped NASA by putting in the heads of scientists the solutions to the technical problems they encountered because they had a deadline. It was necessary to arrive on the moon by the end of the 60s. In fact, they were about to abandon. Then suddenly, mysteriously, they managed to solve all the problems because the extraterrestrials aimed at a meeting in neutral territory, to try to shake humanity from the yoke of the domination of power. Have care to control the instincts that the human heart raises and have full consciousness of how much is granted to you. That is, they were authorizing. To overcome the spiritual and material misery into which you have fallen, for having believed little in He who is in you and through you lives and works in this living cell of His macrocosmic being. May your conquests be placed on the plane of the truth that is in you, and may they never become negative and fatal instruments. So, what project did the astronauts have? Project Horizon, or something similar. Fatal to the yearned desire of the longed-for evolution towards the happy progress and towards the superior universal good. To walk safely towards the celestial prairies of creation, one needs to inflame one's souls with pure faith and strip one's spirits of every selfish material garment. In the pure spaces, contrary to what an astronaut has said, it is easier to enter into contact with God, to be with God, and feel the very sweet harmony of His eternal justice, of His celestial peace, and of His divine and penetrating love. In space, the soul expands, the body loses weight, and the spirit perceives more the divine essence of creation. In fact, almost all the astronauts who went out to go to the moon have changed life. Today, I'll talk to you only about one, because it would be long. In these conquests, our fraternal help will not fail. So, they, he repeats, have helped the Americans to reach the moon, helping them also scientifically, but it will fail and you will be harshly opposed if to them you do not give their spiritually just value, as well as if from them springs the fatal desire of the conquest of power, with consequent grafting of evil. Whatever your thoughts on this, our message that we have entrusted to our operator to be disseminated, it is useful anyway. Know that we have solid bases on your satellite moon, and we can, if this should become necessary, cause you serious tribulations, in order to deprive you of further steps in these enterprises. Be shrewd and repentant, and our help, they repeated again, will not fail you. With universal fraternal benevolence we greet you. Apollo 12. Departure. November 14th, 69. Therefore, they land in July, and already in November another trip immediately. Moon landing on the 19th, return on the 20th, and splashdown on the 24th. From Earth to the scientists of NASA, Adonaisis, through our operator in service on Earth. Our invitation addressed to you in due time through the same means remains valid. Take care to make your science fully aware, avoiding committing actions that could seriously compromise your ascent in the field of space knowledge. Avoid to implement what you have resolved to carry out in this enterprise and in future ones. So they already knew what was in the head of NASA and the military. November 15th, 69. They were also here on a journey. They were going towards the moon when this message comes out. We do not ignore your projects, aiming to cause dysfunctions on the energy structures of the satellite moon. Our control is active, and we will never allow the realization of your scientific designs that aim to disharmonize the natural process that governs the stability of the celestial body. We invite you to be shrewd and repentant, and to turn away from your minds all those negative projects that can drastically affect the healthy conquests of external spaces. We do not ignore anything about your present and future projects, even if these are still in a state of initial development. You, gentlemen, know very well what we are referring to. Do you understand why they tried to do away with Eugenio Siragusa? If you do not wish to create distressing situations, keep in mind what we have communicated to you in due time, and have responsible full consciousness. Our support could fail, at the moment that we will deem most suitable and most opportune to put you in serious consternation. We do not wish to discourage you from healthy intentions, but we do not want your science to produce imbalances, where balances mean security, in the law of creative harmony. We follow you and observe you. Be certain of it. It is what we had to tell you. All space missions, this is a fact of Chronicle, have been followed, both on the way out and on the return by extraterrestrial spacecrafts. During the departure from the moon of Apollo 12, the base was made to fall on the surface of our satellite, which is the landing base, which crashed in the ocean of storms. The impact of a relatively small object produced an abnormal and unexpected effect, an earthquake that was recorded by the seismographs left on the lunar soil. The moon vibrated like a gigantic gong for almost an hour. An earthquake of 55 minutes. That is practically what did they do? They did this. Let's see if I find a photo here. At departure, they also pulled up what then becomes the launch base to go back. When the LEM left, they brought it back up, and then they dropped it and made it fall to the lunar soil. It's a relatively small object yet. The celestial body, not being pressured by a dense atmosphere like ours, caused an earthquake of 55 minutes. And so the extraterrestrials began to get pissed off cosmically. Through Eugenio Siragusa, the extraterrestrials explained the causes of the impressive lunar earthquake. Earth scientists have remained disoriented in noting that the earthquake artificially caused on the moon reverberated for a full 55 minutes. A phenomenon of this kind, in fact, has no counterpart on Earth, and the reason is simple. When on your planet an earthquake occurs, the vibrations of the geoid are, among other things, attenuated by the magnetospheric mass, that is, of the Earth's atmosphere, which weighs 1 kilo per centimeter. That is, on every square centimeter of surface, the column of air that reaches up to space weighs 1 kilo. In fact, when we have the internal pressure that counteracts the external pressure, that is, it is said we have low pressure, because multiply the number of square centimeters of our body by kilos, and we have quintals of air that press on our body. So if the pressure is too high, the organs function poorly. If it's too low, they function poorly, because we must be in pressure equilibrium. In other terms, the band of atmosphere that presses all around the globe exerts a braking action. The moon, instead, is not surrounded by atmosphere. It has a very light atmosphere, and therefore results freely suspended in the cosmic void. At the occurrence of an earthquake, its mass vibrates without any external brake, until the oscillations exhaust themselves on their own. The earthquake caused by the astronauts of Apollo 12 was of modest entity, but an earthquake of greater intensity could make the Selenic mass vibrate to such an extent as to cause even a shift of the lunar orbit with incalculable consequences, that is, the moon could precipitate on our heads. We have exhorted you from not conducting experiments that could cause dysfunctions in the energy structures of the moon. Today we return to warn you again from continuing on this path. In a now remote past on Earth, a second moon orbited around your planet. This, due to a very violent impact with a meteorite, shifted its orbit so much as to approach sensibly your globe. Thus, progressively attracted by the Earth, the planetoid ended up precipitating on it, causing the destruction of Atlantis and a vast change of the configuration of the continents. What happened then could still be repeated. Be therefore wise and well advised so that such cataclysms are not renewed. Apollo 13, a mysterious incident and a retaliation. Departure April 11th, 70, and incident April 14th. Splashdown, because they did not land on the moon, April 17th. This is a painting. This is a painting by former astronaut Alan Bean that shows the accident of Apollo 13, which happened on April 14th at 5:08 Italian time. The official version attributed the cause to a defect in the drainage system of one of the oxygen tanks. Painting by Alan Bean, astronaut of Apollo 12. In the seminar, I show various works, and others I will show in the next ones, by this astronaut, who through his paintings has said some truths that he could not say vocally because they were all threatened. In the photo, this is the part that exploded. You see it's uncovered. You see the damaged service module photographed after being expelled shortly before the end of the mission because they brought it back to Earth. You can clearly see the missing panel that detached due to the explosion of the oxygen tank. At the time of the accident, Eugenio Siragusa revealed to his intimate collaborators that on board the Earth spacecraft, there was a plutonium atomic warhead, with which they wanted to do a seismic experiment, and that the extraterrestrials sabotaged the mission to prevent such a foolish gesture. At the time, even the Italian consul Alberto Perego came to the same conclusion, that it was the extraterrestrials, the cause of the electrical fault that made explode the oxygen tanks of Apollo 13, forcing the crew to return to Earth without being able to land on the moon and execute the atomic test. So, according to you, a civilian mission brings an atomic warhead to the moon? Evidently not. And so there was always the little hand of power that pursued the idea of installing on the moon military bases. The extraterrestrial messages spread by Eugenio were a valid confirmation, considering the warnings given since the beginning of the Apollo missions, and that I have read to you. In 1971, Eugenio reported passages from an article published by the Swiss newspaper La Suisse. The messages sent to NASA and other European editorial offices said roughly, "Be careful, gentlemen scientists. The moon is fragile. It is light, and your rockets risk sinking it, making it exit from its orbit." NASA never responded, the Soviets neither, because Eugenio was sending to the main embassies of the most important nations, which responded, A reply from, "The English made us laugh. We thank Mr. Seton Shinar for the message that he has kindly sent us." But this, despite having not responded, neither Americans nor Soviets, does not mean that they have not taken knowledge of it. Interplanetary flights risk creating modifications of the cosmophysical equilibrium. That's why the extraterrestrial fleet monitors without pause, not only our flights of satellites and rockets, but also the nuclear experiments and the missile bases. If Apollo 13 failed, for example, it is because the rocket carried a plutonium bomb destined for the moon, and the extraterrestrials interdicted this act. This is Mr. Maurice Chatelain, electronic engineer of French origins, expert in telecommunications who worked in the United States for North American Aviation, which was another of the many subcontractors of NASA that had installed the communication system of Apollo. In his book, Our Ancestors Came from Outer Space, he affirms that NASA was trying to understand if the moon was hollow or artificial, and that the mission of Apollo 13 to that end provided for exploding an atomic bomb on our satellite. He has confirmed that a UFO was following Apollo 13 and has caused the known incident before the astronauts could do their folly. Then since there were behind all this also the Masonries, these powers never do anything by chance, and symbols are used to convey encrypted messages to the public. If we observe the logo of Apollo 13, we see the chariot of the god Apollo that transports a sun. But this sun can be seen as the first instance of an atomic explosion, a symbolic way to notify the main but secret purpose of the lunar mission, that is, the missile carried on board an atomic bomb. These are the very first millionths of a second of the atomic explosion. They are photos taken with a very high-speed camera that was called Rapatronic. What, a UFO crashed? You see the rays? After the accident, this thing comes into their head. They decide to perform an experiment that consisted in crashing the third stage of the Saturn V rocket on the Moon, calling this test Saturn Crash. After the command module had detached and had successfully performed the docking maneuver of the LEM, the propulsor of the third stage of the Saturn rocket was restarted to put it on a collision trajectory with the Moon. The maneuver succeeded, and 3 days later the stage, which weighed about 15 tons, precipitated on the Moon at about 135 kilometers northwest of the landing point of Apollo 12, north of Mare Cognitum, at negative 2.55 degrees of latitude, lunar obviously, and negative 27.88 degrees of east longitude. The impact velocity was about 9,000 kilometers per hour. This is an image of the time from a magazine, and the impact corresponded to the explosion of 10 tons of TNT. The seismometer positioned by Apollo 12 recorded the consequent lunar earthquake that lasted over 3 hours. Then, obviously, the astronauts knew that it had been the extraterrestrials who sabotaged their mission, and it could be that from the base they told them, "These aliens have broken our balls. They didn't let us explode the bomb. Let's throw a nice rocket on their heads." Considering what had been programmed with the Horizon project, which was a military project, the hypothesis is not to be discarded, and this is the earthquake recorded by the seismographs. That obviously transmitted to Earth. Graph of the earthquake caused by the test of Apollo 13. And this is the photo of the crater caused by the impact of the Saturn crash. Crater of about 30 meters in diameter, clearly visible in the LROC photo, Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter. Reconnaissance is a purely military term. Let's not forget it. So the LRO is a military pathfinder. Then they publish the photos in black and white, because here it's full of stuff, domes, extraterrestrial installations. For whoever wants to look for it, this is the code of the NASA archive. The Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter was launched on June 18, 2009. Terrestrials, your science without conscience proposes to us the urgent necessity to stop it. That is, we no longer let you come here. We have granted you sufficient time to meditate, deduce and determine a decisive and positive scientific activity of yours, both on the general plane of armaments, on Earth I add, and on the spatial one in particular. Now we are forced to intervene with the means at our disposal, in order to provoke a radical change of the state of negativity that you have prefixed to feed with cynical pride and with so much arrogance. It was a retaliation. They say, you are like this? Fine. Our process will begin with the divulgation of the present message to the world. Our consoling work has ended, and our operator has been invited to suspend every divulgative activity. May 1st, 1970. So the subsequent Apollo missions were still permitted, but the folly went on. October 18th, 1970. Careful of what you propose to implement in your next journey on the satellite moon. Again, we recommend you to keep present responsibly what we have communicated to you in due time if you do not want to incur serious troubles. Keep present also that the particular cosmophysical conditions do not lend themselves to those experiments that you have prefixed to edify. A coercive intervention of energetic forces provoked by explosions on the surface or in the lunar subsoil. They had the bomb. He says it clearly, explosions on the surface or in the subsoil could release such an imbalance as to propose to the celestial body a substantial gap of its normal site of repulsion with respect to your planet. Your disgrace would become irreparable if the satellite should reach the hypercritical point of its current orbit, etc., etc., etc. Our means are already on alert, ready to help whenever it should become necessary. The interventions of impediment or of annulment of your mission or whenever it should become necessary, the interventions of impediment or of annulment of your mission in space. Be careful, gentlemen scientists of the Earth. And instead, what do these people do? Message from the end of the 70s. So we have seen the message of October 70 in 71, in January. So a few months later, Apollo 14 leaves. So they gave them time to modify their intentions. Despite the worrying result of the experiments of Apollo 12 and 13, the failure of the mission of Apollo 13, the experiments of active seismology. But what do you need to seismologize? For me, they were carrying out tests of weapons or something similar. They continued with Apollo 14, with the explosion of 13 cartridges of the 21 planned. That is, they brought themselves the bombs. These crazy people, the grenades, they blew up 13 of them. And again, they threw on the moon the LEM. That is, they pulled up the base again and hurled it on the moon. With Apollo 14, an experiment with a grenade launcher remote-controlled from Earth was planned, but it was abandoned for fear of damage to that instrument of earthquake detection, a series of very complicated and sensitive scientific instruments. But the Saturn crash already done with Apollo 13 was repeated, with analogous results. And this is the photo of the impact crater, again a crater of 30 meters. In short, the nonsense into which have fallen the researchers, that is that we have not gone to the moon, is to cover all this. I am concluding, then we will pass to the questions. But they did not stop. With Apollo 15, experiments of seismology were again carried out using the S-4B stage and the ascent section of the LEM. Again, they made it fall on the moon. With Apollo 16, small explosive cartridges and grenade launchers were used triggered with radio control from Earth, so they didn't do it with Apollo 14, and they did it with Apollo 15. Finally, with Apollo 17, a lunar seismic profiling experiment was executed, realized with 4 explosive charges to be detonated after the return of the astronauts by radio controls from Houston that served for the study of the subsoil. Then the Apollo lunar missions were suddenly interrupted. So someone had really had enough, that is, he says that's enough. And in these facts that I have exposed, we find the real reason for everything that caused the end of the missions on the moon. Because in the Horizon project, the new weapons to be tested on the moon were already planned. This is a kind of lunar gun that launched like hunting rifles. Because on the moon, it is more difficult to do as is done on Earth, and they had to test these weapons. And this is a scene from the Horizon project, you see. An astronaut who shoots at the extraterrestrials, even if they have drawn them as other astronauts. But here, there is a capsule that has little terrestrial and much extraterrestrial, so these wanted to make war on the aliens and have thrown all that stuff saying they were seismic experiments, but it's a folly. So when the extraterrestrials told them enough and didn't let us go anymore, obviously, in detail I can't tell you what happened, but they put the embargo on us. You don't come here anymore. So NASA had to invent, but this they had already programmed from before, the lunar fakes, which exist. This is a photo, the AS-11 of Apollo 11, 40-5869. So they made the real missions, but in parallel they realized fakes. Here I show you only a couple. This is a fake photo, clearly fake because the lunar shadow is sharp. Because the gap between light and shadow is sharp. How can this astronaut be so illuminated? He should almost not be seen even if the suit is white. Let's look at the anomalies. So the rungs of the ladder are hyper-illuminated. The light comes from this direction. The antenna of the astronaut's suit is illuminated. The astronaut is white. The heels of the astronaut's shoes reflect a point of very close light. The shadows on the moon, being there, a very rarefied atmosphere, are sharper. Instead, here you see the classic shadow of terrestrial type because the photons don't draw sharp shadows, but tend to fade, you see? So this is a fake photo. Let's look at the details. You see the antenna is illuminated, yet here we are in total shadow. The rungs are very illuminated. Look here, the reflection of the artificial light on the astronaut's shoes, so it's a fake photo.
There is also the shadow between the legs.
What?
There is also the shadow between the calves.
Sure, because the light, here there is probably a reflective panel that lightens the astronaut to make him evident. In fact, yes, here. It makes the shadow of the calf because the light is shot from where I am towards the astronaut. Instead, this is a real lunar photo. You see the shadows are sharp. And then another thing, in the fake photos, being the light point very close, the trajectory of the shadows tends to diverge. Instead, when the light point that illuminates is very far away, like the sun, the shadows become parallel because the distance is enormous. So in reality, the shadows are divergent, but on distances so great that on Earth they are not perceptible. So this is another parameter. Instead, here you see all the shadows. So the astronaut is very illuminated from here and very dark. Look at the leg that is black. Instead, this one here is all white. He has a slight shadow here, but it's not black. Instead, here the shadows are all parallel. The flagpole, the shadow of the astronaut, the shadow of the little car, the shadow of the lem. The lem is illuminated from here, and here it is completely black. And then the soil, even in the distance, is all illuminated equally, because the solar light point is very far away. And I repeat, it is a photo taken at the dawn of the moon. Because the sunlight is low, it doesn't come from above, it comes from here, so there is a very low sun. So this is a real photo, and the previous one is a fake photo. Then, probably to make the fakes was hired Stanley Kubrick. I believe in the second seminar, I address in a very extensive way this discourse. And so one of the conspiracy theories on the conquest of the moon is that to film the scenes of the alleged fake moon landing was the celebrated American director Stanley Kubrick. Perhaps it's a coincidence, perhaps not. Just the year before the launch of Apollo 11, which happened on July 20th, 1969, came out the masterpiece of Kubrick, 2001, A Space Odyssey. According to critics and specialists, the film that most approaches the reality of a true space mission, even in the technical aspects that were revised even for Kubrick's film by NASA experts.
Tra l'altro, una cosa che pochi sanno, Kubrick era appassionatissimo di UFO e di extraterrestri.
Among other things, something that few know, Kubrick was very passionate about UFOs and extraterrestrials. There is an interview that he released to the Men's Weekly Playboy of those years, where he believes in life in the universe, believes in God, so probably, I believe, they deceived him. We tell you the truth. Then they trapped him and blackmailed him because at a certain point, even physically, Stanley Kubrick becomes a bit one who lets himself go. That is from being very elegant and well-groomed when young. We see here he grows his hair, the big beard. He becomes also very unfriendly as a person. And this is a scene of a set of the film. 2001, A Space Odyssey. Therefore, that hypothetically he could have been chosen precisely by the American government to shoot the false scenes of man on the moon, finds valid reasons, precisely if for no other reason than of a merely professional character because he had made that beautiful film. Today very boring, which among other things is an extraordinary summa of spiritual symbolisms. It's a film that since childhood has fascinated me. I watched it, re-watched it, but I didn't understand a thing. Today I read all the occult messages that Kubrick has put in this film. Fundamentally in the film, Kubrick reveals the origin of human life, thanks to the extraterrestrials, the extraterrestrial presence in all the history of humanity, and the advent of the new era and of cosmic man. But only an initiate can come to understand. This is Kubrick, you see, with people from NASA. This is Arthur Clarke, the writer who made the novel that was The Sentinel, from which then Kubrick draws inspiration to write the film, and these are people from NASA. Since Giorgio Bongiovanni talks with the extraterrestrials, I asked him the question. Give me audio. There is a diatribe at international level if we went or not to the moon. A comment of yours, or maybe something that the extraterrestrials told you.
Look, I make two comments to you. One, that it is scientifically proven that we went to the moon. Two, I have been there, and so there are the traces of our astronauts. On this, we can bet our lives. This is my answer.
Among other things, Giorgio.
Among other things, we have had contacts on the moon, Armstrong, Aldrin, Collins.
Sure. Because there is around this idea that it is a manipulation of power. To what end, according to you?
Instead, many fake photographs of the moon are true.
What do you mean?
The theory is not unfounded. There are documents that demonstrate that they were a studio, that there wasn't Armstrong there, that it was all done in a studio.
A cinematographic fiction.
A cinematographic fiction. I tell you right away the why they prepared this mixture of facts, because the Secret Services told NASA, if these talk about UFOs, we will say that we made all a fake, a fraud to see the reaction of humanity. And so we discredit them even worse, because then all humanity will accuse them. You deceived us, and you were actors, and you earned money from it. So, let's introduce some photographs and footage false, waiting for them to reveal something. If they don't reveal anything, it remains so in doubt, but the majority of humanity believes that we went to the moon. So the detractors, poor things, get themselves tricked by this manipulation. Look, peer after 22 years that I do Anti-Mafia 2001 thing that I have learned from the Secret Services, because every now and then all journalists we look for is the double deception. They give you one thing, but in reality they are thinking and doing another. Either they mislead you, or they manipulate you, because the work of the Secret Services, with all researchers, citizens, is almost never genuine. So when they put around photographs on the fact that we were never on the moon, there is a famous book. It's not like that. The photos that NASA has divulged, there are photos really with extraordinary tricks, then also done badly among other things in 1969 to 70.
I am carrying forward a series of meetings where I show precisely the tricks they did.
Exactly, they were afraid.
Mixed with real photos.
Preventively, because they knew that the astronauts would meet the extraterrestrials. But if there is the Project Majestic 12, that is peer, we send the astronauts to the moon and we think that the UFOs don't show themselves? So meanwhile, because you know, they were free people anyway. Those were heroes you went on a television live. How do you deny Armstrong? You deny him by showing that it was all a fake. They took away his salary, sent him on the street, and he was scared until the day before his death.
But I think that in the days of quarantine, they will have also threatened them to keep quiet, surely.
But it wasn't enough for them, because they are military. The military for the homeland is capable of dying. When they told him, we send you on the street, money to your family, you are responsible, and you made it all up then. How did I make it all up?
And anyway, privately, Armstrong has spoken with various people saying that he had had an encounter.
Certainly there is also the famous
recording
of American radio operators who have captured Armstrong, who is saying, they are in front of us. They are many. Incredible. They are in front of us. They were the spaceships.
Giorgio, you said that you were taken to the moon. Expect everything now.
And who were they? But I wanted to say that I was taken to the moon during a spritz. Here, so I revealed the truth.
Since it is well known that Bongiovanni is a crazy mythomaniac, he paints the stigmata, does all these things here, and so he is not a credible character. He is not a credible character. Obviously, I'm being ironic. He is not a credible character. Let's see a random astronaut. This is Mr. Frank Stranges. 1927-2008. He was a writer, author, scientist, ufologist, and founder of the National Investigations Committee on Unidentified Flying Objects, the NICUFO. Stranges has held conferences on the themes of UFOs, space, and scientific phenomena all over the world. He was considered one of the main authorities on these topics. And it comes to Strange's mind to invite an astronaut to talk about what he had seen on the moon. In 1976, he invited the astronaut of Apollo 15, James Irwin, to speak at a convention on UFOs regarding what strange things he had seen on the moon. Irwin answered him, "Look, I have a pension to worry about. I have a family to support, and they told me to completely pull back from all this, otherwise, what Giorgio said. The experience on the moon has marked, as for other astronauts, deeply James Irwin, who is this here, photo that we have seen also before. In fact, he converted, became a deeply believing Christian, biblical researcher, and even preacher. After that journey, he considered more important that Jesus had put his feet on earth, rather than man his own on the moon. And many astronauts returned from the moon had radical changes of consciousness or profound existential crises. So the strategy of distraction and confusion obviously plays in favor of power, whose intent is to hide the truth of the extraterrestrial presence on the moon, and obviously also on the Earth. Prevent the astronauts from talking and avoid having to give explanations on why we never returned to our natural satellite. Concluding, we will never be able to understand what was explained in this conference if we don't consider a fundamental fact. The extraterrestrial visit, I said it at the beginning, is the truth most feared by the power that has the world in its hand. They have declared it themselves various times. So only in this perspective is it possible to understand the gigantic misdirection that has been implemented on the conquest of the moon, a pervasive and truly maniacal manipulation that defies reason and logic if we don't consider this simple fact. They must hide at all costs the truth, that is, the extraterrestrial visit. This is a frame of the first public press conference of the astronauts of Apollo 11, painfully sad and embarrassed. Press conference of August 12, 69, they had returned in July, after the quarantine upon return from their lunar journey. There they threatened them. They brainwashed them. You must not talk or we will cut you to pieces. You, your family, your career, which is what Irwin says. So the astronauts had seen the universal truth and had to keep it silent to the world. The astronauts realized, Giorgio says they are patriots, yes. They realized that their government was criminal. The 3 astronauts of the first human moon landing never participated in other space flights, and after a short time they all left NASA. I believe Collins the year after, Armstrong 2 years after, and Aldrin shortly after. They all left. Aldrin, he became taciturn and was a maniac. Researcher, he went to the South Pole, he went in the caves, he went in the Aurora in Uruguay. He looked for the places where there is extraterrestrial activity. Because he had seen the truth and was looking for it. All have left NASA. So some parts of the material of the Apollo missions are true, others have been manipulated, and others, that is photos that they have erased like the one you have seen, the gray moon superimposed on the real moon, the space around the Earth erased. That is, they have manipulated them because in space, evidently, there was something that they don't want us to see. But not the space as we see it from here. The space outside, the Van Allen belts, outside the Earth's magnetic field. And only the astronauts of the moon have been able to see with their eyes what is outside. And almost all have come out shocked. So, all this madhouse to hide and mislead the incredible discoveries of the extraterrestrial reality made on our satellite, blackmail the astronauts who have been witnesses of incredible things that they could not reveal on penalty precisely of the destruction of their careers and their lives. So I repeat, this is the real reason for which they left NASA, the discovery that they had served, a criminal power. So we return. To the incipit of departure, Satan reigns over the highest places determining the course of things. We have a gigantic power, free will, and the use of cause. If we understood this very simple fact, because we are always used to being trapped in the effects of our stupid choices, when there is something that gives us desire and attracts us, we never get to say no. We mess up our life, and all of life becomes a continuous chaos of situations that always end up badly, because we don't govern desire. We are manipulated, but if we manage to dominate the cause through the acquisition of the science of the Spirit, we would be free. Now, if we wanted to, but we need to study. I close with Neil Armstrong. July 20th, 94, celebration at the White House, 25th anniversary of the first landing of man on the moon with Apollo 11. Armstrong gave a brief speech of just 3 minutes. A speech that, addressing some students present, he concluded with some enigmatic words for those who don't know. But for us who have seen, they are very clear, and are truly beautiful. It's a way in which he anyway, with a form also intelligent and artistic, philosophical, told the truth. He told it to the White House on their face.
On July 20th, 1994, at the White House, were present the 3 astronauts of Apollo 11, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins, for the celebration of the 25th anniversary of the first landing of man on the moon. The works were opened by the then Vice President Al Gore, whose speech closed with a standing ovation to the 3 astronauts. The celebrations were concluded with a speech by the then President Bill Clinton. His wife Hillary was also present, and various other personalities. Neil Armstrong, at the moment in which he stood up to speak, received again warm applause from the public present. The famous astronaut, in conclusion of his brief speech of just 3 minutes, addressing some students there present, pronounced some enigmatic words. Let's listen to an extract.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, Mr. President, members of Congress, fellow astronauts, ladies and gentlemen. This week, America has been recalling the Apollo program and reliving the memories of those times in which so many of us here, colleagues here in the first rows, were immersed. Many Americans were part of Apollo, about 1 or 2 in each 1,000 citizens all across the country. They were asked by their country to do the impossible, to envisage, to design, and to build a method of breaking the bonds of Earth's gravity, and then sally forth and visit another heavenly body. Today, a space shuttle flies overhead with an international crew. A number of countries have international space programs. During the space age, we have increased the knowledge of our universe 1,000-fold. Today we have with us a group of students among America's best. To you, we say, we have only completed a beginning. We leave you much that is undone. There are great ideas undiscovered, breakthroughs available to those who can remove one of truth's protective layers. There are places to go beyond belief. Those challenges are yours. In many fields, not the least of which is space, because there lies human destiny.
What did Neil Armstrong want to refer to when he talks about places that go beyond the imaginable? And what does he mean with the phrase, remove the layers that protect the truth? Perhaps that truth that he saw in his lunar journey and that he could not reveal to the world. Those truths that have been revealed by the contactees, like Menger, Adamski, and Siragusa. Perhaps for this, he says that in space, that is in the contact with the civilizations of other worlds, lies human destiny.
Thank you.
Grazie, troppo buoni.
Thank you, too kind. Thank you. It was a nice journey, eh? That future awaits us with so much love, with so much peace. Because these beings, for the small experiences that I have lived and that I live, are of an enrapturing beauty. They are beautiful, they are powerful, they are full of love, and they await us. We must only do our work, which is that of changing. We must change, because as we are not good. We terrestrials are belligerent by nature. Just the minimum solicitation, and immediately we growl and show our teeth and we are ready to kill. They blow you a parking space. Or other nonsense. And this situation degenerates more and more, so we must change. We are not suitable. As we are not good. There is no other problem. For them, there is not a political problem. There is not an economic problem. There is not a religious problem. There is only that the human being of Earth is violent and belligerent. We must change. This message they want me to transmit to you, then revealing to you the truth of things that power wants to hide. So these groups that are created here in Rome, there is Giovanni and other places, there are others, are work groups that are furnaces, terrible, where The human being is put to the test because these groups are all directly supervised by these beings. And I assure you that they are very serious people.
E vi assicuro che gente molto seria. Se non andiamo bene, loro ci selezionano.
If we are not good, they select us. Because when we unite or enter a group, we go to take, not to give. We must change. The vector is always I, to me, to me, to me. Wrong. The vector is towards the outside, because only by giving one receives. Christ says you want to be served? You must learn to serve. So we must put ourselves at the service and carry the cross. The cross, what is it in the end? To change, the change. We are here, we must arrive here. They help us. But this space that there is between the terrestrial and the extraterrestrial is our cross, is the change. And we have a motto: take away everything from us but not our vices. I resist anything except temptations. We must change. As Oscar Wilde was saying, we must change, friends. There is not a political enemy. There is not a scientific career. There is nothing that can bring us into the new era if not what Christ has told us. Change. One cannot put a patch of new cloth on an old garment. It will tear even more. One must change garment. Lay down the old and dress in the new. They help us. But it is difficult because we are hostile to the suffering of changing. Free will. Then, if you give us a hand to cover the expenses of all this organization, there at the reception desk, I believe there is a money box, a cash box, something. Leave, if you want, in full freedom the offering that you feel, to give us a hand to carry forward this work, because we don't take money from anyone. I have had offers of millions of euros from potentates. We finance you, they say. No, I lose freedom. I lose freedom. But the problem is not this. Because I haven't lost freedom, I've donated it to them, to these beings, because otherwise I cannot be their collaborator. That is, I am a kind of military. I am under orders for a grandiose and beautiful project, which is the reform of humanity of Earth and the creation of the new kingdom. So they asked me, I asked, the encounter because I wanted to collaborate. Yes, okay, but then we tell you what to do. So leave the railways, eh? Leave the railways. Leave the railways now, come on. Let's see. Let's reason about it. No, you must leave the railways. Because if you must become a divulger, how can you lose 8-10 hours of your time to do choof-choof on the track? That is, we want you full-time because we can't find any. They don't find any. I myself, at a certain point, so difficult it was that literally I sent them to hell. I said it's enough. No, it's enough. I can't take it anymore. After a few years, they looked for me themselves, and they told me, we can't wait for you anymore. Either you come back with us, or we must look for someone else. What do you do? At your orders. Because those years in which I took back my free will were the most infernal years of my life. I thought I had been banned. Instead, they took the initiative themselves. They contacted me again themselves and they told me, look, what do you do? Obviously they don't move if orders don't arrive from higher up. So, every now and then I think about it and I get cold sweats. Because if they hadn't looked for me, I don't know how I would be today. Surely not here. With you. So really I owe everything to these beings, and they are... It's a shocking experience because our concept of power is, power crushes you and enslaves you. Instead, to know a power that is wise and full of love, but you live that power, you feel it. It is true power, much more than terrestrial power. It's a thing that shocks you. They are powerful, but they really exude love from all pores, but they are just and are not weak. So we have everything to gain by ceding our free will to them and saying, look, I give it to you, tell me what I must do, and I do it. But at the beginning, it is really difficult because they, if it's all, it's not all, but except a bit. So all, they decide. But on the other hand, if you are at war, it's not that you say, this morning in battle. I'm tired, no, I go to the cinema. No, this morning we attack the enemy. Fine, about the contribution, I've said it, yes. All right. Questions, I am at your disposal. We have 3/4 of an hour for questions. Go.
Hi, I am Giordano.
Hi, Giordano.
So?
You have the surname Fiume, right?
Someone came to me one day to take a bath.
Yes, tell me.
I think you know him.
Yes, I know him.
So, not to be pessimistic, obviously, but as we are seeing, unfortunately, those prophecies you talked about are coming true.
Fortunately. How unfortunately?
No, unfortunately, it's a regret for the people who unfortunately are losing their lives and will lose it.
Whoever will try to save his own life will lose it. Whoever will lose his life in my name will find it.
For this, there is regret. And so, we know that they will manifest themselves very soon at this point.
They will manifest themselves. You mean, obviously, Giordano, massively, because they manifest themselves every blessed day. Look at the case of Juanito Juan.
Yes, as you have already explained many times, in the sense that if a nuclear conflict should arrive, even...
So we must consider one thing. If they manifest themselves tomorrow, it means that there is no more hope for those who have not received the message of awakening. So they, as long as there will be a single human being susceptible to awakening, wait. It's not that they wait. The Supreme Head waits, which is Adonaiasis, or God, if we want to call him so. When he will see that the harvest is finished, he will give the okay. So as long as there is a single human being to save, we must operate in the vineyard of the Lord.
According to you, what is the timeline seeing the things that are happening?
So, this is a wrong question. Because if you are certain of being saved because you have completed all the works that Christ asks you, you are all right. But if, the day in which they manifest themselves, you have not completed the works, it will be the saddest day of your life, because you will be discarded. Obviously, I say it to everyone. So, this discourse, when it will be, doesn't depend on them. It depends, in a certain way, on what we do. As long as they don't manifest themselves, we have time to operate. But when they manifest themselves is the day of the exam. If you have studied, you will be promoted. If you haven't studied, you will be irreversibly failed. That day, and I say it to everyone, will be a wonderful and terrible day. Because today we forcefully content ourselves with photos, footage, or who, like me, maybe has experiences. But we are four cats. The majority of humanity must believe, or by faith, that is by trust, not by blind faith. Or because I anyway provide the evidence, the scientific data, I put together the extraterrestrial messages, the historical facts. So in the end, the facts are those you can only tell me. I'm not interested, but you can't tell me that it's not true. But as long as There is time. We can save ourselves. But the day that this reality descends into our cities, and we see them, and we see the spaceships, and we see the Lord who will speak on all the televisions of the world, and you see what you have lost, there you shoot yourself in the head. Because there all humanity will understand having been taken for a ride, having been deceived and having been stupid, just as all the people who believed in the magic serum and today cry bitter tears because they have terrible reactions. So the date tells us nothing. It is not a factor that can cheer us up. It tells us, and can cheer us up, what am I doing today? Am I susceptible to being able to enter the spaceships? Otherwise, it's better that I get busy and that maybe the Lord leaves me a few more days, because perhaps I need more time. Understood, Giordano?
I'm trying anyway. Personally, I'm trying.
Perfect. The date, anyway, I evaluate that the threshold limit, but I could be wrong, because here we are, in the middle of the crazy ones. For me, the threshold limit is 2033. But then, tomorrow Israel throws an atomic bomb on Iran. It's over. Anyway, not certainly decades also, because the planet is at its limit. The situation is at collapse everywhere. The clash between West and East is very heavy. Certainly they intervene. Now from the highest divine spheres it has been said that they give us a bit more time. But how much do you want to stretch this story? So I believe that in about 10 years or less this story closes.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Giordano. Adelante. Who is it?
Hi, Pierre.
Hi, tell me.
I'm here.
There she is.
Hi, Pierre.
Hi, Jessica.
A question. There has just been this eclipse of moon.
Of sun.
Of sun, excuse me. I'm not familiar with astronomical events.
Well, the moon that covers the sun.
Anyway, there has been this eclipse. It has not been a normal eclipse, let's say, in quotation marks, it has darkened. Both continents, both North America and South America, and there have been recorded both UFO sightings and celestial signs like the figure of the Virgin of Guadalupe, divulged by Jaime Maussan.
Yes.
Is there a prophetic symbolism, a message relative to the prophecies regarding these eclipses?
No. Apart from the fact that I haven't had time and way to verify because anyway, pareidolia, optical aberrations, etc., etc. But I want to say, what else does Our Lady must tell us? What else does the prophet must tell us? With the total catastrophe that there is on planet Earth, that is the ferocious clash that there is between Russia and the Allies and the United States and the Allies, is a very clear sign that we are in the final part of the apocalyptic clash between the two beasts. It is more interesting, beyond the signs or the sightings that anyway there are every day, it is more interesting what an eclipse is. The eclipse is a modifier of energy. So when the sun is darkened by the moon, the finger of shadow travels a zone of planet Earth. Those are the zones from which then arise the crises that bring suffering to humanity, which is suffering of rebalancing, that is karmic discharge. So this eclipse and the passage of the comet that is passing now, curiously they have called it Diablo. The comet brings a new genetic information to the sun. The eclipse varies the energy of the sun, so everything will accelerate and will potentiate in good and evil. So the general situation of humanity will become more and more terrible. The situation of who is operating for good will become more and more powerful and stronger. To us, the choice of which side to go. That is anyway, we have free will. These forces press on the humankind, but the humankind has free will and willingness, which is a divine attribute such that what the universe proposes to me, I choose which side to go, obviously. I must pay the consequences in good and evil. So the wide way is, I don't care. I mind my own business and go straight ahead. The narrow way is I try to change because I know that there is a project of a beautiful future and I don't want to miss it. Then it depends on us. Please.
Thank you. Good evening, Pier Giorgio.
Where are you? Raise your hand.
Paola, listen, many years ago, because I also witnessed the moon landing, true or false that it may have been.
Yes. I had my little bed brought to the kitchen, because in Italy it was night, and I wanted to see them. So I said, Mom, bring my little bed in the kitchen, and at the time of the moon landing they woke me up and I saw it.
Anyway, given this, I believe now several decades have passed, I witnessed a news broadcast where, I remember it was a woman, she announced, the next bombing of the lunar soil from Earth. I, at the time, did not have consciousness, but I wanted to understand.
Yes. Yes, they were supposed to bomb this area because they wanted to see if in the scattered dust there was water.
From what I remember, this thing happened. Did it really happen? What were the consequences?
For me, they didn't let them do it. The material they divulged was false.
And then one last thing, I wonder, after all the provocations they did, to these beings on the moon with their various raids. But why didn't they beat them up properly? Paola.
Because they are not like us. There is a passage of St. Paul, one of his letters, that says, "Give drink and food to your enemies. By doing so, you accumulate burning coals on their head." There is the law of cause-effect, and I assure you that that goes heavy. They don't dirty their hands because they would enter into the karma of those people there. Unfortunately, we are stupid and ignorant, so we take revenge and get ourselves involved in the karma of the one who has offended us. Instead, when Jesus tells us turn the other cheek, forgive 70 times 7, if someone tries to take away your robe, you give him also the cloak. If one wants to force you to travel a mile with him, you do too. Why? If the universe is governed by the law of cause and effect, if someone offends me evidently, either I am a saint and I am completing a Christic sacrifice, therefore I must not take revenge because I am a saint, or I am purging karma. So if I am purging karma, I give you more of it. Bring it away from me, this karma. Hit me also here. Look, you have stolen only my wallet. I have here also 2 meal vouchers to consume. That is, I give you everything. Understood? Then, in this planet we are all burdened with a karmic load. In fact, I who have karma will soon fall down. We are, what's your name, darling? What's your name? Paola. We are ignorant. We are a mass of technological cavemen. We are ignorant. The goats with the little beard that jump on the cliffs are more intelligent than us. We don't know what we are. We don't know if we are eternal. What there is after. We are a bunch of madmen. This planet is a hell. All the dreams that we had when young vanish miserably in terrible disappointments. Our dreams of love, of family, of well-being, a mess. Because we are synchronic in the daily violation every blessed day of the law, and that hits us. It is a law. It is above us. I have never made a request to age, but I age. I don't like it, but we must age. We die. We don't like to die. Then, since we are the spirit, we observe as dismayed spectators the becoming of our body in which, as we age, we don't recognize ourselves. But who is that one there? But I am always myself. At 50 years, at 60 years, at 70 years, at 90 years. I am always the boy who had dreams. Because the spirit lives intimately, its eternal essence. So to find oneself with this damned body that breaks the balls, it wants to do poop, it wants to do pee, and it releases air when it shouldn't. A mess. So, we must look for a way out from this terrifying physical prison. The extraterrestrial societies that have understood all this, for example, don't age. There is a scene of a contactee. They take him to a planet, and they present to him a family. Ah, you know we go to eat at someone's home. Ah, well, they present the family to him. Nice to meet you, nice to meet you, nice to meet you. He says, but the parents, where are they? One of the girls says, I am the mom. And I am the dad. He says, but you had children at 1 year? No, she says. My daughter is 25 years old. I am 300. They were the same. That life interests me. They reborn and know who they are, like when you go to bed, you wake up in the morning, and you are always yourself. You don't lose consciousness. So this very sad life that we live is the effect of our wicked, stupid, ignorant causes. So what must we do? Renew ourselves. Enter into these logics not as a belief. Ah, how beautiful, emotive, scientifically. Because the processes of death actuate determined tasks. But if I know what they are, I don't have to wait to die. I begin to do them here. So the gap between death and reincarnation is briefer. With the hope that sooner or later I escape from this demented madhouse that is planet Earth, and I incarnate myself in a planet a little bit more elevated. These are the true conquests, not a career. The villas, the cars, everything ends anyway. Arrived at 70 years. Where do you go? You have seen the Rockefellers. Soros all old, drooling, ugly. And maybe they rape children thanks to the money they have. But we become the same. Old, ugly, and ignorant people. It's not nice because the wise person, even if he is 300 years old and is all wrinkles, will always be fascinating because he has a light that attracts everyone, young and old. So we must aim at the true values of life, not at the externalities. Women put silicone here and there. That is, I wouldn't like to touch 2 balls of silicone. I want organic stuff. What is the problem? All the terrestrial system pushes to crush us inside a desperate, despairing vision of life. We, in the face of the poverty that exists in the world, are kings and princes, we are. But our lives are sad. They are full of problems. We have a lot of matter. But we aren't happy. Why? Because we are not matter, we are spirit. Sooner or later we will understand this thing. So if I am spirit, you are it, and we all are it, I must enter into this concept at the project level. I must invest there. I must look for the evidence. I must understand how we function. Because from there I begin to work for my sacrosanct eternity because I want to live it. It pisses me off that I die. What is this story? I don't agree. I must solve the problem. I must find a solution. With these ideas, the extraterrestrials have arrived. Good, I want to work with you. Then it's not easy, but you see what you want to do.
Good evening. I am Laura.
Hi, Laura.
Listen, Pierre. At the end of January, I think, there was a sighting of a fleet. That was in the Borghesiana zone.
Yes.
On the same day, there was the killing of a very young boy, 14 years.
The aliens didn't kill him?
No, I wasn't saying this.
Better to be clear.
No, but I wanted to say, since it was a few kilometers away, could there be a connection?
Look, so many people are killed every day that... No.
Okay, all good.
Between the sightings and the killings, unless one dies of a heart attack from emotion or from fear. But the astronauts were so much frightened, and at the same time remained shocked by the power and beauty of this reality. They went off their heads. Who has the microphone? Question. Go.
Test. Hi, my name is Giovanni, and my question was this. We have spoken about soul expansion, so of the soul in field.
Expansion.
Expansion. And it brought back to my mind a bit like when you immerse yourself in nature, substantially. And so this staying in city places so gray and gloomy, I imagine it detracts the soul from expanding. So,
the sun generates an energy that is called psyche, that nourishes our soul. So, the more sun you take, the better you feel.
Okay.
In fact, in the cities, one of the most common diseases is depression, because we take little sun. The urbanization in megalopolises or very large inhabited centers is the way with which Satan weakens us, to then throw us into vices and make us lose the soul.
Okay, and the personal question that I wanted to ask.
The system is a monstrous mechanism, most ingenious to destroy the soul of humanity and bring it to perdition. It serves only to that. Satan reigns over the highest places, determining the course of things.
Okay. Does it make sense to work in the opposite direction? That is to try to reverse this course? That is this question, let's say I had it already from before. But then,
the solution is not to go to live in the countryside or in the sun. The solution is to do the works of good, because it is the most powerful way to expand your soul. Even if you are in hell, and you do good, you are all right. It is a technique. That is, we must exit from the emotive concepts, or supernatural ones. We must enter into this damn science of the spirit, which is not the purulent junk that have sold us the religions, the New Age, or the crazy people that are around. It is the scientific knowledge about us. Just as the body is governed by laws, the spirit, that is we are the spirit. We don't have a spirit. We are the spirit. Who is speaking to you is a spirit that is inside a body. I have a name, Pier Giorgio Correa, but it is a bureaucratic convention because I don't know what I am called. Because in the next life or in the previous one I had other families and other names, but who the hell I am, I don't know. I must discover it. What I know is that there is a Father, a being of light that has generated me, that is our true Father, not the one that furnishes us a body, the putative material. Father, we must seek who we are because we don't know it. We are dead to ourselves. We identify ourselves with a body and with a name, but these are masks. In fact, person comes from Greek and means the mask. So we are outside the essence of what we really are because we are delinquents. We violate the laws every day, and those hit us. Not the laws of judges and tribunals, that with subterfuges, you escape from them. From the natural laws, no one escapes. So Berlusconi, who has enjoyed and done too much of everything in his life now, is a wretch who cries bitter tears for the condition he is living because he is alive. He has only left a body. Sooner or later, these realities that belong to us, we will make them ours. We come from many lives and from many deaths, and we are here today. And it will be so, in the future, until we understand it and get out of this cycle that I don't like. Since I am eternal, I am interested in eternal life. How long does it take? 1 billion years, fine. But I will have to start sooner or later. That is, it must become projectual. Otherwise, we take ourselves for a ride by ourselves to make nice evenings with nice discourses, but then all home. To make the usual shit life, it's not good. You know the one who goes to hell, and is welcomed by Mr. Satan, and he tells him, "Look, since you have been a good bad guy, we let you choose the circle where to go." And this one begins to go around hell and says, "But here one is worse than the other." At a certain point, he arrives in front of this big pool of shit. And yet he saw all the damn smiling with the head out. And he says, "Well, they are in the shit up to the neck, but at least," he says, "I choose here." Sure? Yes, yes. Ma, among all those I have seen, this seems to me the most acceptable. Ah, fine. He calls the guardian demon and says, "Take this one for you." He arrives. Yes, yes. The demon takes him, then turns towards all the others and says, "The hour of air is finished. All under." So it ends up that these meetings are the hour of air. They must not be so. That is this joy that we experience. Maybe also a bit of anger because we see the deceptions to which we are subjected. But it must be a moment of growth, to roll up our sleeves and go towards this future, because it exists. It must be projectual, not emotive. We must exit from emotivity and enter into projectuality. That is, he who dies must not aim on matter because he will lose it.
Non deve puntare sulla materia perché la perderà. Colui che muore deve puntare e finanziare la sua evoluzione, che è l'unica cosa che ci portiamo via.
He who dies must aim to finance his evolution, which is the only thing that we take away with us. Then, for goodness sake, to feel good is not a crime. Jesus says, "Love your neighbor as yourself." So it is also to seek a material well-being. But let's give ourselves a limit. It cannot be that the end, that must be a means. Planet Yarga, 300 billion inhabitants on a territory as large as Australia in 1967. They made the work groups just as we are doing them on Earth. They managed to conquer the whole society. You know how they did it? Some intelligences were created, some arcs, through the contacts of extraterrestrial civilizations for the Yargans. These gathered and said, "Let's give ourselves an economic ceiling. At how much do we want to live? All? 10,000 euros per month is enough? Yes, even too much, but 10,000 is fine, just so as not to have worries. But all that which will exceed the 10,000 we invest it, to improve society." They conquered the planet, they made a political revolution, and these cultural centers lived well. But they had given themselves a ceiling. Not like the rich of Earth, who have 8 rich people alone have riches equal to half the terrestrial population. It's not good. It's illegal. It doesn't serve. It's an act of injustice. Let's give ourselves a ceiling. 10,000 euros per month, I think, is a good salary to live on. To not have material worries, house, car, everything. But then we invest. To make of this world a beautiful place, a grandiose garden, not to make atomic bombs, tanks, and all these follies that we see. No one will ever bring it to us, we must do it ourselves. If we don't do it ourselves, no one will give it to us, least of all the minister without hope or any other politician. Among other things, he has become a sportsman. Have you seen that he always runs? He runs. And happy people who shout at him, "Run, run." Please question. Is this clear, friends? Let's not make joints of spirituality with Korea. Use me as an instrument to change your life. I, with their help, have made it. And it is a life that I would never have expected. So I have left, but what they have given me is priceless. It is a life of adventures, of friendships, of encounters, novelties. That is, I have fun like crazy, then I do myself a headache like this. Because I am always fascinated by the truth, I want to discover new things, inform the public, but my life has changed. In a form impossible without the help of these characters.
Pierre? I'm here, Esther.
Yes, who is it?
Good evening.
Tell me.
I wanted to know, I'm off topic, but I wanted to know, what is the reason why Judas betrayed Jesus Christ?
Judas betrayed Jesus because Judas symbolizes terrestrial humanity. Judas didn't betray Jesus, he wanted to screw him. In the sense, I explain myself, Judas was the most educated apostle of all, the richest one. And he was the one who made the Lord enter into places of high social level. And even I believe that the family of Judas in some way perhaps also financed Jesus, because anyway also at that time money was needed. But Judas wanted a political act. Since he knew, he was absolutely convinced that Jesus was God incarnate. And so this one has powers. He resurrects the dead, gives back sight to the blind, heals the paralytics, stops the storms, walks on the water. That is, he does stuff. He says he must knock down the Roman Empire. That crushes us. And Jesus told him, "You are foolish. My kingdom is not of this world. I don't want a political exterior change, I want an interior change of humanity." But Judas, nothing. This thing didn't suit him, and this idea comes to him. Obviously, Satan makes it come to him. I'll put him in a corner. I'll have him captured, and there I want to see if to free himself he doesn't use his powers and destroys Rome. This was an act of arrogance, not because he didn't believe in Jesus or wanted to betray him. He wanted the Lord to do what he wanted, not what Jesus wanted. Which is what we all want. That is to pretend that others are as we like. In the couple it is typical. You are no longer what you were before, or she who was before, but you don't even know yourself. How can you know how I am? It was only the projection of a desire. Because when desire takes us, we project into exterior things our desire. Because of the male or female we have in front of us, we don't care. Apart from the fact that we make improper use of them. As for males generically, the woman is all that useless flesh around that thing there. For terrestrial males it is so. So Judas made this error, but the error even more grave was to kill himself. Because while Peter goes towards the Virgin and throws himself at her feet and asks for forgiveness, Judas, arrogant, judges himself and punishes himself, not taking advantage of the Christic sacrifice of the Lord who had poured his blood for everyone. So if Judas threw himself at the feet of the Virgin and said, "Mother, I am a wretch, I am disgusting, forgive me," he would have become Saint Judas. He would have given his life for the Lord and would have been like everyone. Peter denied Jesus on his face.
Then so, at this point, Judas created the true original sin, presumption. Yes.
The sin of Lucifer, humanity, is under this suffering because it is arrogant.
Presumptuous.
Have you seen the Americans? They have seen everything. Damn, we throw the missile on their head. Fuck you. So we are arrogant, and we will make the end of Judas. This is the terrible truth. Excuse the swear words.
Pierre.
The last one.
Here I am. I am Marco. The last very quick one. The difference between spirit, soul, and body. Well, that is clear.
You are the spirit. The soul is a field that performs various functions, among which that of nourishing and organizing the human form. In fact, the Soviets called it form-structuring field. So the soul doesn't have any sentient faculty, as neither does the body. They are levels that are linked to the spirit to transmit to it sensorial information in a dimension that is not of the spirit. We are not of this world. We come here. We were born in the sun, because our Father is a solar genius and lives there. And he will kick our ass when he returns, if we haven't done the things that he told us. So there isn't the thought soul. The soul is a structure that must do tasks, to give information in input and in output to the spirit that you are, I and we.
Okay, thanks.
The soul doesn't think, doesn't do anything, it is a body. All right. Thank you.
Grazie.